Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in Season 2 Part 11 of What If the Transformers Crash Landed in Code Geass. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Broken walls. Darkmount New Town. The Combaticons stood at attention outside the main fortress of their capital on Earth, along with the mining detail assigned to them by their leader, all ready to be deployed to their given set of coordinates. Combaticons and Viacons, listen up. Onslaught instructed. Megatron has assigned us to these set of coordinates. A three-dimensional hologram was displayed in front of them that showed them the general area of their assigned destination, a portion of the Great Wall of China. We're being deployed to a mountain-based area with an ancient human-made structure stretching over 21,000 kilometers. We do not yet know what our target is, but that's not important right now. What is important is us securing it. Onslaught, ever since the Autobots and their human allies have fought back, we've suffered setback after setback. Swindle said. First Area 11, then the Ark, then that mess in the Chinese Federation, now we're going back to that continent. Vortex added. As much as I hate to admit it, we've underestimated the Black Knights. Onslaught explained. But that won't happen again. Surveying the area, I have a plan that will allow us to claim victory. Best case scenario, we destroy our enemy and take the relic. Worst case, we obtain the relic. Either way, we win. Finally, time to show those meat bags why we're the toughest cons out there. Brawl punched his fist into his palm. What's the plan? Blastoff asked. The greatest strength of the Autobots and the Black Knights is their unity, their teamwork. Onslaught began. We start by taking that away. The Great Wall of China, an outstanding feat of human achievement, and arguably the largest structure built by human hands given how long it was. All seemed peaceful on the forested mountain range it stood upon, until a ground bridge portal opened up along the southern side. Stepping out of the portal was Theta Team, consisting of the Aerialbots and Black Dragon unit, a total of 16 individuals, Autobot and Black Knights in their respective nightmares. Jetstorm and Safeguard deployed from Drift, allowing the two mini-cons to observe the ancient structure before them. This is the Great Wall of China. Jetstorm said in awe. Truly incredible. Safeguard was in awe as well. It sure is. Zedine answered with a smirk. Now let's keep the cons from tearing it down. So, to be clear, we're looking for an ancient relic launched from your home planet. Shink said towards Silverbolt. Though we don't know what it is yet, it's likely to be a Decepticon-made weapon of mass destruction, or some sort of historical item. That's the basic summation, yes. Silverbolt confirmed. And if we can't retrieve it, our best option is to destroy it. Chiba said. So where is it? Joe asked. Based on the coordinates provided, our target is about 10 kilometers eastward from our current location. Toto replied, observing the data on his Zangetsu's screen. Then why did we not groundbridge closer? Safeguard asked. I agree, wouldn't this enable our enemy a better chance of obtaining the relic? Jetstorm also asked. We cannot be certain that our enemy isn't already here. Drift explained to his students. Without knowing who we are dealing with, it is best to approach this situation with caution. I agree with Drift. Senba said. We should be cautious. Then we'll split into 4 separate groups and surround the location on all ends. Toto began. Jetfire, Urabe, Zedine, and myself will come in from the north. Shink, you will take Chiba, Joe, and Air Raid from the south. Silverbolt, Senba, and Hong Ji-yu on the west. Drift, Asahina, and Windblade on the east. And what of us, Commander Toto? Jetstorm asked. You two will remain by my side. Drift told them. But Master, Safeguard began. My decision is final. Drift insisted. With reluctance, both mini-cons bowed. Yes, teacher. Alright, let's move out. Silverbolt ordered as he transformed, engaging magnetic locks to attach Honggu's Gunru to its hull before flying off with Senbei's command Akatsuki right behind it. The others followed suit as they began to split off. Toto's Zangetsu took flight alongside Jetfire's Jet Mode, Urabe's own command Akatsuki, and Zedine's Gekka Shiden. Shinki's Shenhu flew with Chiba's command Akatsuki, and Air Raid's Jet Mode, which attached Joe's Gunru with its magnetic locks to its hull before flying off. This left the only remaining group behind. Safeguard, Jetstorm, return. Drift ordered. The mini-cons seemed hesitant at first, but before they would comply, Asahina spoke up. "Hey Drift, how's about they ride with me this time around?" He proposed, much to the mini-con's surprise as even Drift raised a slight eyebrow. "I mean, we're all in the same group, so what does it matter?" "Very well." Drift nodded in acceptance. "But when I call for assistance, you two must answer." "Understood." "Yes, teacher." Safeguard and Jetstorm both bowed before hopping up onto the shoulders of Asahina's Akatsuki. "Come on guys, we got a relic to grab," Windblade said before she transformed into her jet mode, with Drift doing the same into his own vehicle mode before following after Windblade with Asahina and his passengers right behind them. "Thank you for allowing us to ride with you, Asahina," Safeguard told him. "No problem," he assured. "I think I get where you're coming from." "Where we are coming from?" Jetstorm asked, exchanging confused eye contact with his fellow mini-con. "It means I think I know what you're going through," Asahina explained. "You want to be able to prove yourselves to your master, impress him. But he keeps you from stepping up because he feels you aren't quite ready." "Yes, that's exactly it," Jetstorm confirmed. "Please don't misunderstand, we admire and respect Master Drift to the highest degree. Before, our previous master did not have the best intentions." Safeguard began. "We were tasked with stealing vast riches. Though he did offer us training and a place to live, we had to return the favor with complete loyalty to him, even if it involved us doing questionable things. That is until Master Drift took us under his wing and helped us to flee." Jetstorm added. "Though we know he has the best of intentions for us and has never once let us down, he has been incredibly strict with us. We never do anything on our own when it comes to the mission. We are always by his side. And while it is an honor to fight beside him," Safeguard continued, "you feel like you can be doing more, and he might be underestimating you." Asahina finished, much to their surprise. "Yeah, it was like that with me too. Before Britannia invaded Japan, I was a student of Toto. He taught me so much, swordsmanship, military tactics, and after Japan fell, he personally oversaw my nightmare training. And despite all that, he rarely let me leave his side or do anything on my own. And if he wasn't by my side, he always had somebody else with me, mostly Chiba, Senba, or even Urabe. I thought it was because I was the youngest, and probably the most inexperienced, and when we became soldiers and formed the Four Holy Swords, all he did was boss me around. All of that, it's hard not to take it personally. And while I did question him at times, I never disobeyed him, not once. And that's probably the only reason I'm still alive right now." Safeguard and Jetstorm looked to one another in surprise as Asahina continued. "Drift aren't all that different, they might come off as strict and even unfair at times, but I'm sure they know what they're doing. Toto has never once let me down, and I know Drift is the same for you. The time where you guys can prove yourselves will come, I know it. And I know that Drift probably knows that too. Just be a little patient." This earned a smile from both mini-cons. "Thank you for your words, Asahina." Safeguard nodded. "Yes, it is nice to meet someone who understands, as you say, where we come from." Jetstorm added. "No problem." Asahina smiled. After some time, the team consisting of Toto, Jetfire, Urabe, and Zidane arrived at the dig site, which was about a mile away from the Great Wall. His team hid behind the wall itself as they observed the site. Already a Decepticon excavation team had begun to dig away at the land, carving a massive hole as they continued to excavate for the buried relic. "This is the North team, we're in position now," Jetfire reported. "South team, in position," Shink reported back, a blue light flashing from a hill on the other side of the dig site. "East team, ready and waiting," Windblade replied. "West team, standing by," Silverbolt responded. "Looks like they haven't found the relic yet. Then let's move in now. We got them surrounded, we can get the jump on them," Air Raid urged. "Negative, something's not right here." Toto's eyes narrowed. "We're only seeing Decepticon miners, no real defenses of any kind. Something's not right here." Suddenly, the section of the Great Wall they were hiding behind exploded, sending the Zangetsu, Jetfire, the Gekashiden, and Akatsuki command unit flying back. "Well, what do you know?" Stepping out of the smoke was none other than Onslaught, with a team of tank and heavy-duty Viacons right behind him. Even Toto the so-called miracle worker can be caught off guard. It's a trap, Zidane exclaimed. Fire in the hole. Vortex and Blast-Off both flew down from the sky, several jet Viacons behind them as they laid a bombardment of energon blasts down on the south team, forcing them to scatter and find cover. Oh, you guys want a dogfight, huh? Air Raid transformed and flew after the two airborne Combaticons. Air Raid, wait. Shink flew after him in his Shenhu, leaving Chiba and Joe to deal with a group of Viacons that transformed and landed in front of them before opening fire at the two female Black Knights. Explosions erupted around the area surrounding the West team, causing Silverbolt, Senba, and Hong Ji-yu to look in surprise as Brawl and four tank Viacons rolled up in their respective tank modes. Payback time, you puny meat bags. Brawl exclaimed as he and his team of heavily built and armed Decepticons opened fire. Multiple Viacons moved in their vehicles modes and surrounded the East team, prompting Windblade and Drift to draw their respective weapons, with Asahina doing the same in his Akatsuki command unit while Safeguard and Jetstorm deployed, reading their weapons. Swindle casually strolled up to them with a smirk, standing at the head of his unit. I love it when suckers fall for sucker bait, don't you? He grinned before he and all the Viacons surrounding them opened fire. Windblade retaliated by blowing her jet fans in one direction to clear a path. This way, come on, she urged as she ran down the path, using her swords to cut down the downed Viacons that were near her. Asahina and Drift provided cover as the former returned fire with his Nightmare to gun down one Viacon while Drift used his own sword to block some of the shots. Safeguard, Jetstorm, go with Windblade. Drift ordered. But Master, we can help. Jetstorm protested. Go. Drift exclaimed. Do what he says. We'll cover you. Asahina exclaimed, only to gasp in shock as Swindle had already rammed his Akatsuki in his vehicle mode before transforming to engage in close combat with Drift, firing a point-blank energon blast powerful enough to knock him back. Jetstorm, we must go. Safeguard pulled his fellow student away, who could only grimace in shame before running to catch up with Windblade. Back with the North team, Toto's Zangetsu had drawn its katana, parring the offensive strikes from Onslaught and his axe. A pleasure to see you again, Mr. Miracle Worker. Though I didn't expect it. Toto narrowed his eyes as he spun his Nightmare to deal a kick to Onslaught and knock him back. We defeated you and your team before, we can do it again. I wouldn't be so sure. This time we're prepared for you. Onslaught said as he gestured to around him, showing the struggles of his team, such as Urabe and Zidane in their Nightmares barely holding their own against the offensive firepower of the tank Viacons. Though Urabe's Akatsuki command unit fired its Radiant Wave missiles at one tank Viacon to destroy it, he was quickly blasted back by two more. Even Jetfire was unable to get in the air and transform as the heavy-duty Viacons came at him in close quarters combat. Jetfire couldn't even find an opening to attack as at least four large Viacons ganged up on him, punching and slugging him to prevent him from countering. Not only that, Toto could see multiple explosions all across the area, specifically at the three locations the other teams were at. The Combaticons were expecting this. You may have caught us off guard before, and we did underestimate you, but it won't happen again. Onslaught told Toto. Now we'll show you why Megatron considers us his most elite team. He charged and tried to bring down his axe onto the Zangetsu, but it quickly blocked it with the katana, allowing the Toto to deliver a flip kick to Onslaught's face with his Nightmare, but the Combaticon quickly recovered and retaliated with a punch just as the Zangetsu slashed its katana at him again. Both attacks struck, though the force behind Onslaught's punch was enough to send the Zangetsu crashing into the Great Wall. Onslaught saw a diagonal cut across his chest that was already leaking energon. He glared at the Black Nightmare as it stood up straight, the blue fluid dripping from its primary weapon. We won't fall so easily. And even if we do, we'll be certain to take you with us. Toto declared before driving the Zangetsu forward in a charge. With the South team, they seemed to be having an equal amount of trouble. Chiba had managed to cut down one Viacon with her Akatsuki's katana, but was forced to fall back as her Nightmare was shot in the shoulder, two airborne Viacons hovering in the air as Chiba's Akatsuki was forced to circle up with Joe's Gunru, and though she shot down one Viacon, her unit's right arm was shot off by an energon blast. It wasn't long before both their nightmares were completely encircled by 7 hovering Viacons that continued to fire down upon them. "Ah, we can't fight like this. We're surrounded," Zhou exclaimed as her nightmare's left leg was blasted off. "Xianglin, eject now," Chiba ordered. Zhou promptly opened her cockpit, allowing Chiba to reach with her Akatsuki's hand and grab her before twirling and shooting out her Harkins to force the Viacons back, allowing her and her passenger to drive away, even as the Viacons returned fire. Above them, Air Raid and Blastoff appeared locked in a high-speed aerial chase in their respective vehicle modes, with the Aerialbot appearing to be in pursuit of the Combaticon, firing multiple Energon blasts in an attempt to shoot him down, but Blastoff proved too quick for even a single shot to land. "Hold still, will ya?" Air Raid exclaimed as he fired a missile, but Blastoff flew straight up to avoid the missile and fell back down to get behind Air Raid, firing and effectively turning the tables on him. "Let's see if you can outfly me, Autobot." Blastoff shot forward, prompting Air Raid to fly away, but Blastoff was closing the gap quickly. The Shenhu fired its Harkins from its wrists at the circling vortex, but he transformed and fell to avoid them before transforming again and shot at the Shenhu to ram it, knocking it off balance before transforming yet again, hovering in place to unleash his shockwave attack, further sending the Shenhu tumbling closer to the ground, though Shink was quick to try and stabilize his nightmare. "Shooting from behind. You Decepticons are truly cowards." Shink spat. "Call us what you want, a win is a win," Vortex said with a grin. "Just look at your Autobot friend over there." Shink looked to see Air Raid was in serious trouble. His right engine had already been hit by Blastoff's attack, causing him to lose control, enabling Blastoff to close the gap, transform and grapple into Air Raid's hull. "No, get off me. Sorry, Autobot. We just crossed the finished line." Blastoff aimed his Energon blaster right at the face of Air Raid's jet mode. "And you lost." He fired only 3 more shots before the frontmost of Air Raid's jet mode exploded and caught fire. Blastoff let go and hovered in the air as he saw Air Raid spiral toward the ground before crashing and exploding, ending the life of the Aerialbot right then and there. "Air Raid," Shink exclaimed in shock. This was the first time he had seen an Autobot killed. The logical part of him knew that the Autobots were mortal beings like humans and were capable of being killed, having killed off a few Decepticons himself, but to actually see such a mighty and noble being meet a terrible end like that was something else. "Don't look so surprised," Vortex told him. "There's a reason why the Autobots feared our team in particular. We racked more dead bots than most other cons, and now you're about to join them." He opened fire on the Shenhu once more. The West team wasn't having that much success either. Brawl's superior firepower, as well as that of his team of tank Viacons, were more than enough to keep Silverbolt, Senba, and Hong Ji-yu from retaliating. All 3 were forced to find cover behind some trees at a distance, with desperately trying to return fire, only to have the area in front of them torn up by explosions from the tank blasts. "Yeah, this is how you do it," Brawl exclaimed in joy while he was in his tank mode along with the Viacons. "Tear it all up. Leave no cover for them." That is what they had been doing since the start of this explosive fight. Brawl and the others blasted away line after line of trees and land to prevent their enemies from finding any kind of stable cover and retaliating. Another line was blown away, and just like before, Silverbolt, Senba, and Hong Ji-yu were forced to retreat even deeper, though Honggu's Gunru was caught in the explosion and its lower half was blown away. "I'm down," Hong Ji-yu shouted as he opened his Nightmare's cockpit. "I'll get him. Cover me," Silverbolt ordered. "Roger." Senba fired all his Akatsuki's missiles ahead, hoping they would hit Brawl and his team. They only hit the burnt and scorched ground in front of them, forcing him and his team to transform and halt their advance. Though this allows Silverbolt to rush up and grab the exposed Hong Ji-yu before retreating. "We need to regroup. We can't fight back like this," Senba said. "You're right," Silverbolt acknowledged as he opened his comms. "Silverbolt to all units. We have to regroup. We're getting picked off bit by bit out here." "Yeah, we're working on it," Windblade replied as she cut down one Viacon, but was forced to fall back as more appeared from behind the trees in front of her to open fire. Despite their best attempts at retreating, Windblade, Asahina and Drift were forced into a circle with Jetstorm and Drift in the center. "Master, I do not believe we will be able to retreat from you as we are thoroughly encircled." Safeguard told Drift. We cannot stay like this. Drift exclaimed as he and Windblade used their respective swords to parry and block the enemy's energon blasts, while Asahina returned fire with what he could via his Akatsuki's machine guns or Harkens. There must be some form of cover. We spotted an entrance to an underground cavern near our location. I'm sending the coordinates now. Senba responded. Asahina received the coordinates and had it displayed on his cockpit screen in mere seconds. I have it. Windblade, Asahina, you are the only ones that can fly. Take my students and rendezvous with the others, this time I will make sure you escape. Drift said just as he pointed his finger at his mini-con students before they would even protest. This is non-negotiable. He was shot in the shoulder by an approaching Viacon, but quickly got up to cut him down with his sword. Retreat. Though it was with great reluctance, Windblade had to relent. You heard him. Hop on, boys. Left with no other choice, Safeguard and Jetstorm both transformed into their disc-like alternate modes and attached themselves to Windblade's arms before she transformed and flew away with Asahina leading her to the received coordinates. All alone now, Drift had drawn both his swords as he moved to cut down all the encircling Viacons, even as they shot at him. He decapitated one while using his other blade to impale one from behind, drawing both swords again to slice and dice a third, but was shot in the back. He refused to back down however as he recovered to slice down a fourth but was shot again in the legs to bring him down to his knees. Drift groaned in pain and exhaustion, but still refused to surrender even as the remaining Viacons aimed their blasters at him. I do not fear death. He said defiantly. Who said anything about death? Swindle mocked as he approached the downed Autobot. I'm thinking interrogation would work better. He quipped himself a blaster-like device and fired at Drift, shocking him before he fell to the ground, unconscious. EMP blaster baby. I knew I made a good choice in buying this. You actually bought something? One Viacon asked. I thought you stole it. I kinda did when I sold that old rotary engine a few cycles back, making them think it was one of a kind, but it was just a piece of junk. Swindle grinned. Junk of treasure. I swear, I make conning an art form. We're falling back. Proceed to the rendezvous. Toto exclaimed as he flew his Zangetsu up and backwards, opening fire with a series of missiles onto Onslaught, which he dodged by rolling out of the way before returning fire. The Zangetsu had turned around and unleashed a series of missiles onto the Viacon's swarming Jetfire, providing him with much-needed space, but also leaving himself vulnerable for his Nightmare to be shot in the back with precise shots by Onslaught to disable the Zangetsu's float system, forcing it to the ground. Toto. Urabe exclaimed as he sliced down one Viacon. No. Go and meet up with the others. I'll hold them back, Toto ordered as he drew his Nightmare's katana to engage the remaining Viacons. He's right, we have to go. Jetfire told Urabe, who could only gnash his teeth in frustration. We'll be back for you, sir. I promise. With that declaration, Urabe's Akatsuki took to the air with the Gekka Shiden right behind him, just as Jetfire transformed and flew away with the two Nightmares. The Zangetsu was surrounded by the remaining Viacons, along with Onslaught. But once he saw them leave, Toto gave a deep sigh before deactivating his Nightmare and opened the cockpit to stand up and face the Decepticons with a glare. A wise choice. Onslaught gloated as he walked forward to literally look down upon the old soldier. You look so much smaller from up here. As he gloated, the fire in Toto's eyes had not vanished. He would surrender now, but the time to retaliate will still come, and he will heed the call. From the air, Shink struggled against the combined efforts of Vortex and Blast Off, both circling him in their respective vehicle modes, and the most he could do was try and intercept whatever blast they shot at him. But when he could block the attack from one, he would be vulnerable against the other. This was made evident when he used the Shenhu's Harken flails as a shield to protect himself from Vortex's shots, but it left himself open for Blast Off to shoot the Blue Nightmare in the back. The force was enough to send him back closer to the ground. He tried to stabilize himself as best as he could, glancing to see Chiba's Akatsuki in a similar struggle with Joe inside the cockpit with her. They had also received the coordinates for the rendezvous, but he also knew they couldn't all make it. So, the best he could do was allow them to escape. You need to go, he told them. I'll get you some cover, but you need to regroup with the others and plan a counterattack. I promise I'll be fine. Shink, sir, Joe tried to protest. He's right. Chiba said before addressing Shink. Do what you need to do. I thank you. Shinky's face hardened as he let loose with the Shenhu's chest-mounted Baryon cannon, taking down all the remaining Viacons, before aiming it at the flying Combaticons, forcing Blast Off and Vortex to fly and avoid it. But this also allowed his comrades to escape, the Akatsuki unit flying alongside the beam and managing to make it past the enemy. One look at his radar screen told Shink that all his remaining allies, save for Toto and Drift, had managed to escape. Even Hong Ji-yu had fled with Senba and Silverbolt. This was enough of a relief for him. With his nightmare heavily damaged and its power nearly drained, Shink deactivated the Shenhu just as Vortex and Blast Off landed in front of him. Not bad for a meatbag. Blast Off, but still not good enough. The remainder of the group, consisting of Jetfire, Silverbolt, Chiba, Senba, Urabe, Asahina, Windblade, Jetstorm, Safeguard, Zidane, Joe, and Hong Ji-yu had managed to regroup in an underground cavern that was far enough from the dig site to remain hidden, but close enough so that when they were ready to launch a counterattack, they would be able to do so. They just needed to figure one out, which is what they were trying to do now as the humans were outside their remaining nightmares, trying to reassess their situation. Alright, 3 of our own have captured, 1 was killed, Silverbolt began, he and Jetfire expressing a moment of silence for their fallen fellow Arielbot, with the others following suit. The enemy has the dig site completely secure, and we don't have a means to properly breach it. We only have 5 nightmares, some of them pretty damaged. Chiba said, should the Combaticons combine into Bruticus again, I don't think we can pull off another win. So, what's the plan? Do we contact base? Call for backup? Hong Ji-yu asked. Most of our top guys are all on other missions right now. Windblade said, we can get some Infinitary units, but against the Combaticons, it wouldn't do much. And by the time they arrive, the cons could have already secured the relic. Jetfire added. With a grim expression, Joe spoke up. Be honest, what are the chances Shink and the others will be executed? That took Safeguard and Jetstorm by surprise. The thought of their mentor being executed was unthinkable. Knowing Onslaught, I'd say he would think it'd be best to keep all 3 of them alive. Silverbolt said, he's no Starscream, Onslaught is smart. Toto alone could be a valuable source of intel, same goes for Drift and Shink. So for now, they'll keep them alive. There is no way Toto is giving them any kind of information without a fight. Urabe stated. Unless the cons put him through a cortical psychic patch. Jetfire countered. We heard from Suzaku that Megatron has perfected it enough to work on humans. Even if Zero had thought of some kind of countermeasure, it's not worth the risk. If they manage to break through and get all the info from not only Toto, but also Shink and Drift, they could learn everything. Chiba finished, looking down with a grim expression of frustration. Such is the location of Horai Island and all its defenses. Exactly. Jetfire confirmed. So, we need to rescue them before they escape. Asahina stated. But what about the relic? We can't just let the cons have it. Zidane said. The potential intel they could gain is even worse. Senba argued. We need to rescue Toto and the others. Onslaught will have them heavily guarded, he'll be expecting us to stage a rescue mission. Windblade said. As an argument began to ensue with the group, Jetstorm and Safeguard looked to each other before trying to speak up. Excuse us, Safeguard raised his hand, but it seemed to have gone unnoticed. Why don't we all go in at once, grab them and get out? Urabe suggested. We'll move quickly so they won't have time to fight back. They'll form Bruticus right away if that happens. In which case, we're all dead. Silverbolt countered. If you would just. Jetstorm spoke up as well, but like his fellow Mini-Con, he was ignored. Getting frustrated, they nodded to each other as Safeguard allowed Jetstorm to climb up on his shoulders, standing tall before preparing to shout as loud as he could. We can't afford to split our already dwindling forces, we need a plan. Joe stated. We have a plan. All eyes set on the 2 Mini-Cons, the fact that one was standing on top of the other was enough to get their unwarranted attention before Jetstorm dropped down. We have a plan that could enable us to rescue our comrades and secure the relic. Jetstorm began. First, we allow the Decepticons to finish the excavation and unearth the relic for us. Once it is unearthed, the aerial bots and all those with nightmares will launch a surprise attack. Safeguard spoke next. But it will be done from two ends, forcing the Combaticons to split up and preventing them from combining with one another. While they are distracted, Safeguard and myself will rescue Master Drift as well as Toto and Shink. Jetstorm continued. And should it be necessary, Joe and Hong Ji-yu, the only two here who do not possess any nightmare frames, will secure the Zangetsu and Shenhu if they are being held in a separate location, which does seem the most likely possibility if Onslaught is as cautious as you say. They will quickly deliver the nightmares to Toto and Shink. They along with Drift and ourselves will move in and secure the unearthed relic. Safeguard finished up, and if it is a weapon, we could use it against the enemy force. If not, we'll retreat right away. Silverbolt thought about it for a minute. That's actually pretty clever. Yeah, I think it could work. Zidane said in agreement. Onslaught would indeed keep their nightmares away from the prisoners so they can't get them back, but close enough to keep an eye on them. Windblade said. He'd also keep the prisoners themselves within eyesight along with the excavation. But if we play our cards right with this, his caution could be his undoing. Senba grinned. But Onslaught is still no fool. Jetfire said. He could see we're trying to separate them. But not every Combaticon is as smart as he is, correct? Safeguard asked. We have done some studying of our enemy, notably our most dangerous ones, and the Combaticons do rank high up there. But as Safeguard said, they're not all as cautious. Jetstorm added. For instance, Brawl loves a fight and won't hesitate to jump into one without thinking, while Blastoff is a reckless, speed demon, I believe is the human term for it. Indeed, all we need do is get their attention, and get them to separate, and they will not be able to combine. Safeguard finished. We will separate them and pick them off as they attempted to do to us. Jetstorm put in. Using both the enemy's tactics and psychological weaknesses against them, Chiba said, sounding very impressed. You two are still students. I think you should be warriors at this point. Urabe laughed. This could work, Windblade said, and we did take down a good portion of their Viacon forces in that ambush. If we take down most of the others in a surprise attack, and do separate the Viacons, we could outnumber them, Jetfire said with realization. They're tough, but I've seen for myself that they're not invincible. And if we're lucky and manage to kill one, they won't be able to combine at all. Silverbolt finished. Alright, Jetstorm, Safeguard, we're going with your plan. This earned excited smiles from the two mini-cons as everyone around them began to smile as well with hope and/or eagerness. They might still be able to pull off a win here. Safeguard and Jetstorm shared eye contact with Asahina, who merely smiled himself before nodding and giving a thumbs up of approval. But our initial strike has to be crucial. Silverbolt began. Not only do we have to take down most of their Viacon forces, but we also need to get the attention of Brawl and Blastoff and get them to go in separate directions. So, here's what we'll do. The excavation continued as though nothing had happened. None of the minor Viacons were killed in the fight and had resumed their drilling into the large pit they had already dug into. The only difference now is that the remainder warrior Viacons were guarding the area with most of the Combaticons monitoring the area, while Onslaught oversaw the whole thing from the center. In one corner of the pit, the deactivated Zangetsu and Shenhu were being guarded by a group of Viacons. While some distance away, Drift, Toto, and Shink were similarly being guarded. The Autobot had his hands cuffed in front of him while Shink just sat, as opposed to Toto who remained in a kneeling meditative position with his eyes closed, simply waiting for whatever opportunity would present itself to strike. Who would have thought someone who gave us so much trouble would be so small? One Viacon commented, referring to Toto. Wasn't this guy in Area 11? Another asked. Yeah, he had that fancy black nightmare and was pretty good with a blade. But he caused even more trouble to those annoying little Brits. Good. Always nice to see some self-serving pieces of work get taken down a peg. Never could stand Britannia anyways. So glad that Megatron wiped them out. Now if only we could just do the same to the others. If it weren't for the Autobots, I got a feeling those Black Knight guys wouldn't have lasted a day. You underestimate humanity, Shink spoke up. Because if we're as weak as you say, you wouldn't have gone to such great lengths to lay out a trap like you did. Keep your mouth shut, meatbag. Nobody asked for your opinion. Well, if you wish for the opinion of another Cybertronian, let me share mine with you. Drift spoke up. You do indeed underestimate the human race. And that weakness is why you are going to lose this war. Shut up. One Viacon aimed his energon blaster at him, but Drift merely narrowed his eyes, undeterred despite the blaster being aimed directly at his face. That's enough. Onslaught walked up to stop anything from escalating. Sir. The Viacons saluted. Go take 5, I'll handle this. Onslaught told the Viacons, who walked away, leaving the leader of the Combaticons alone with his prisoners. What's wrong? Got nothing to say, Deadlock. I do not answer to that name any longer. Drift stated. You and I may not have known each other, but I know your work. Onslaught began. You and the rest of Shadow Raker's students made quite the reputation in the Decepticon army. I don't know for sure if Megatron knows, but I don't think he'd mind letting you back into his ranks. I would rather be impaled through my spark chamber than bear that insignia again. Drift glared. Be careful what you wish for, it might just come true. Onslaught replied. Speak for yourself. Toto finally spoke up, keeping his eyes closed. You really should use this chance to finish this off, me especially. It might be your only chance. If you don't, then I promise. Onslaught, his eyes slowly opened with a glare. It will be my blade that pierces through your spark chamber. Onslaught said nothing at first, him and Toto appearing locked in visual combat. It ended when Onslaught chuckled. Wow, I think I might have gotten some chills. You are a defiant one, Kiyoshiro Toto. And I'm looking forward to seeing Lord Megatron break that defiance. Onslaught leaned in menacingly. Onslaught, sir, we found the relic. This got the attention of Onslaught as well as the imprisoned heroes as he walked down to the center of the dig site to get a closer look, but Shink had something else on his mind. You were a Decepticon? He asked Drift. Yes, unfortunately. The samurai-like Autobot answered. A time in my life I'm not particularly proud of. We all have demons in our past that may haunt us at times. Toto spoke up, remembering the place Suzaku was in after he took his father's life and the choices he made. But in the end, who he chose to be now is more important. Don't forget who you were, but don't let that hold you back either. Trust me, I already know. Drift acknowledged. I am no longer the Decepticon Deadlock. I am an Autobot, and I will die as an Autobot. Shink and even Toto couldn't help but smirk at that resolve. But their smirks vanished as they got back to the task at hand, looking down to the center of the pit where they saw the relic being unearthed, with Onslaught overseeing it. It was a rather large relic, large enough that it wasn't held in any of the containers they had seen with previous relics. It appeared to be a large, cubical, metallic crate. Once it was hauled up onto flat ground, the minor Viacons used their torches to cut one side of it open and reveal its contents. The first thing they took notice was a bright red glow that shined out from the crate. The source of that glow is a large chunk of glowing red crystals that emanated an odd sound. This was something the Decepticons recognized instantly. Red Energon, Onslaught said in awe, with all the Decepticons looking awe themselves. Onslaught then chuckled. Oh yes, Lord Megatron is going to love this. Even from their vantage point, and guarded by Viacons, the prisoners could see what the cons had unearthed and overheard it all. What is Red Energon? Shink asked. An extremely rare yet volatile form of energon. Drift explained. Refined into fuel, it provides the power of hyperspeed. How would you describe this hyperspeed, exactly? Toto asked. Some people often use it as a term of exaggeration. I've never experienced it myself, but based on what I've heard, when one is infused with red energon, it appears that time has slowed to a crawl. Drift tried to explain it as best as he could. You move at 10 times your normal speed. We can't let the Decepticons leave with something like that. Shink stated. Patience. Toto said, remaining as calm as ever. I have a feeling our opportunity is fast approaching. Almost directly on cue, multiple explosions erupted all across the area. What? Onslaught exclaimed, as this drew the attention of the Viacons as well. Though these weren't random explosions, they were targeted. Specifically at the groups of Viacons across the excavation site, effectively taking down most, if not all, of them in one fell swoop. The perpetrators were none other than Silverbolt and Jetfire in their jet modes, both transformed and hovered over the site. Hey, blast off. Silverbolt called to him. How about a race? Unless you taking down Air Raid was just him going easy on you. Come and get us, Slowpoke. Jetfire added as both aerial bots transformed and flew away. Slowpoke, am I? Blast Off growled before transforming and flying after them. Blast Off, wait. Onslaught tried to stop him, but he was already gone. Vortex, go get him. It's obviously a trap. I'm on it. Vortex transformed as well and flew to catch up with his fellow Combaticon. Brawl, Swindle, we need to secure the red energon. Onslaught ordered. You got it. Swindle was about to move in, but Brawl was suddenly shot in the back, forcing him to his knees as he turned around to see the Geass, showing off its many blades, including the dual long swords in its hands. Hey Brawl, let's dance. Unless you're scared, Z-Dean teased. Huh. Little Meatbag wants to go a few rounds, huh? Your funeral. Brawl transformed into his tank mode and shot at the Geass, forcing Z-Dean to turn around and flee with Brawl pursuing after him, much to Onslaught's shock. Wah. Brawl. Where are you going? I'll get him. Swindle transformed as well and drove in pursuit. Swindle. Onslaught's optics suddenly widened as realization hit home. His entire team was lured away in two separate directions, away from the relic and himself. They're separating us. Suddenly, Windblade's jet mode flew in and rammed into Onslaught, catching him on her right wing as she flew upward and away from the dig site. Duh. That's the plan. She snarked before she transformed and kicked Onslaught away, sending him falling and crashing to the hard and unforgiving ground. Blast Off flew in literal circles, trying to catch up with Jetfire and Silverbolt. They were careful to not only maintain their speed ahead of him, but even increased it. He was so focused on them, that he didn't even notice his own speed picking up. That is until, Silverbolt transformed right in front of him. Going too fast and no time to stop, Silverbolt lashed out with a powerful kick that sent Blast Off reeling and spiraling out of control in the air before he transformed to try and stabilize himself, but this left him open for Jetfire to fly in and shoot at him with energon blasts. This is for air raid. Jetfire's next shot sent Blast Off falling toward the ground. Blast Off, you reckless idiot. Vortex criticized as he tried to get in on the fight. Don't you just hate it, when your team falls apart? Wah. Vortex couldn't see the two flying Actasukas appearing from the clouds above him, slicing their blades at his propellers as the shot passed him. Vortex fell for a few brief seconds before transforming and hovered in midair to face the two Actasukas led piloted by Senba and Asahina. You cons aren't the only ones that can claim the skies. And these skies are ours. Senba declared before he and Asahina went on the attack. Brawl, still in his tank mode, continued to shoot and blast at the fast-moving Geass, which quickly drew its electromagnetic nunchaku to spin around and deflect the blasts that came to close. Hold still, Meatbag. Brawl exclaimed. Meatbag, that's all I seem to hear. You got anything else, cause it's kinda getting old. Z-Dean snarked. This angered Brawl, up to the point where he transformed and tried to charge the Purple Nightmare, only for two Actasukas to appear from behind their cover of broken trees and quickly zoom past Brawl in crisscross fashion, slicing at him with their swords with enough force to knock him back and down. Swindle had just arrived and transformed, looking in comic shock at not only seeing Brawl knocked down, but the three blade-wielding nightmares in front of him. And the con artist has just been conned. Swindle commented. Damn right. Urabe grinned. Let's go. Chiba stated as the three Black Knight nightmares charged forward. The opportunity? Shink asked. I believe so. Toto grinned. Better think again. The two Viacons guarding them had their energon blasters primed and ready. Might as well put them out of their misery right now. Perhaps you should focus less on what is in front of you, and more on the threat from behind. Drift said with a smirk. Suddenly, two disc-like objects flew through the air and struck the Viacons in the back of their heads, knocking them down as Jetstorm and Safeguard transformed and landed in front of them. Safeguard was quick to act with his Naginata, impaling the Viacon in front of him in between his optics to kill him, while Safeguard slammed his nunchucks in the face of the second before leaping on top and wrapping his nunchucks around the Viacon's neck before twisting to snap the neck and end that Viacon's life. Master Drift, Colonel Toto, Shink. We are relieved to see you unharmed. Safeguard said as Jetstorm leapt up to slash his nunchucks on Drift's cuffs to free him. Well done, students. Drift stood up. Now we just need to get our nightmares, Shink began. Oh, that will not be necessary. Jetstorm smiled as he gestured toward the side to reveal the Zangetsu and Shen who were already rolling in their direction, coming to a stop in front of the group, much to the surprise of Drift and Shink, even as the cockpits opened to reveal the pilots being Hong Ji-yu and Joe respectively. "I do believe these belong to you." Joe smiled. "Joe. Hong Ji-yu. How did?" Shink wondered. "These two little geniuses came up with the plan," Hong Ji-yu summed up, gesturing to the mini-cons. "Separate the enemy, free the prisoners, and secure the now unearthed relic." Drift looked toward his students in surprise as they stood at attention to their teacher. This was really their plan. He couldn't help but smile in pride. "Excellent work, you two." Both mini-cons were surprised at first, but smiled widely at their teacher's praise. "Thank you, Master Drift." They both bowed. "Let's not celebrate yet," Toto said as he got back into his nightmare along with Shink, Hong Ji-yu and Joe remaining in their cockpits with them. "This battle is not over until we've secured the Red Energon." "Red Energon? That is the relic," Jetstorm exclaimed as he and Safeguard turned to see and finally noticed the glowing red crystals still in the open crate at the center of the dig site. "Yes, securing that would be our best option," Safeguard agreed as they and their teacher, along with the Zangetsu and Shenhu moved in to secure the rare form of Energon. Onslaught slashed and hacked with his axe relentlessly at Windblade, who was quick enough to parry each of his strikes with her swords. But when she crossed her blades to block a vertical axe strike, Onslaught swiped his legs to trip up Windblade. He tried to stomp down onto her, but she flipped backwards to land on her hands before flipping again to get back up on her feet and activated her jets to send a gust of wind to push Onslaught further back. "Grr, this is a waste of time." Onslaught grunted in frustration before transforming and zooming off at high speeds around Windblade and back the way she came. Scrap, he figured it out. Windblade transformed herself and flew after him. Onslaught wasted no time in contacting his team. "All Combaticons, converge back on the dig site. Combine into Bruticus the second you get there. No time to waste. Get there now." The hovering vortex fired his Energon blasters at the flying Actasuchus piloted by Asahina and Senba, but they moved quick and around him, gunning in for hit-and-run attacks, Asahina attacking first with his sword, which Vortex attempted to block, but this left him open for Senba to strike from behind. It wasn't long however before Vortex heard Onslaught's order. "Blast off, we need to move. Now," he exclaimed to his fellow flying Combaticon, who was caught in the middle of a pincer attack from Silverbolt and Jetfire in their jet modes. He transformed and was able to escape it before flying off to meet with his partner and followed him. "They're regrouping," Jetfire exclaimed as the four of them flew after their enemies. Chiba rolled forward in her Akatsuki, slicing at Swindle to knock him back. When he tried to open fire on her, Urabe flew down from the side to land a kick and knock him to the ground. Just like with his teammates, Swindle heard Onslaught's orders over the comms. "Hey Brawl, you want a big fight? Let's give them one. The biggest one imaginable," Swindle shouted to his teammate. Brawl had continued to fire at the evading Gekka Shiden, but he heard Swindle's shout and Onslaught's orders. The thought of combing and wreaking havoc never ceased to appease him. "Ah yeah, it's devastation time." Brawl transformed along with Swindle and drove back the way they came. "No, they're heading back," Chiba shouted. "After them," Zidane ordered as they drove their nightmares in pursuit. Back at the dig site, just as Toto, Drift, and the rest of their group were about to obtain the Red Energon, Onslaught's vehicle mode shot forward over the edge of the pit and flew above them, right before he opened fire with his Energon blaster at the group and fell down as he did, landing in between them and the Red Energon just as the remaining Combaticons had arrived. "Combaticons combine," Onslaught ordered as he leapt to the top of the crate containing the Red Energon and leapt higher into the air and transformed into a central chest piece unit. Brawl and Swindle arrived swiftly, transforming into the right and left legs respectively, linking up with the central unit that Onslaught turned into. Vortex and Blastoff had also flown in simultaneously, transforming into the left and right arms, combining with their fellow Combaticons just as the head popped up at the top and the optics shined to life. Windblade, Silverbolt, Jetfire, Senba, and Asahina had all arrived with Zidane, Urabe, and Chiba just as the massive Combaticon combiner came online and loomed over all of them, particularly Toto's group, who could only look in shock and even fear. "Oh scrap," Toto muttered. "You insects, you've really done it now," Bruticus growled. "You made me mad." He raised both his fists and tried to bring them down on Toto's group. Though they were able to retreat in time, the force of the impact shook up the whole ground and knocked them down. Move in, circle around and fire at him from all sides. Silverbolt ordered as he, Jetfire, Windblade, Zidane, and the four holy swords took to the air, shooting at Bruticus from all directions with missiles, energon blasts, and machine gun fire. Bruticus quickly activated his propeller shield on his left arm to shield himself from the heavier missile blasts, while the other attacks did little to no damage on his hull. He then shot out his flamethrower on his right arm to force everyone back. All except Zidane, who tried to fly at the back of his head, where he thought would be a blind spot. If I can get his neck, maybe I can. That proved to be his last mistake as Bruticus swung the rotating propeller blade at the Geass, slicing it to pieces. Zidane's eyes widened as his nightmare was sliced and diced before exploding, ending his life in that instant. Zidane! Jetstorm yelled in shock as Safeguard also gasped in surprise. Everyone present, even Toto and Shink, as well as their respective passengers, looked in shock. But Toto was the first to get back into the present and continue the fight. Shink, fire everything you have at Bruticus, legs. It'll trip him up. Understood. Shinki's eyes narrowed as he activated the Shenhu's chest-mounted Baryon cannon while the Zangetsu fired all its missiles. Both attacks went straight for the legs, but Bruticus had already seen it coming. Nice try. He activated his propeller shield again to block the attack before raising his other fist and slammed it onto the ground, sending a shockwave attack right at them. Move! Drift exclaimed as he grabbed his students and tackled the Zangetsu and Shenhu out of the way, but the force of the devastating attack still sent all of them flying and crashing along the ground. Onslaught is the head of Bruticus. The Combaticon Combiner said. He's learned all your tricks from the last fights. I know them now too. You won't stop me again. Onslaught swung his massive fists violently and relentlessly at the flying bots and nightmares around him, forcing them to fly back and gain their distance. You're kidding. That thing knows how we fight. Asahina exclaimed. I believe we've underestimated Bruticus, Senba commented, a nervous drop of sweat falling from his face. I'm moving in to secure the colonel and everyone. Chiba said. Go. Silverbolt approved. Urabe, cover her. Everyone else, keep the attack up but keep your distance. Roger. Asahina, Senba, Jetfire, and Windblade all acknowledge as the five of them flew around Bruticus, firing whatever long-range weapons they had and avoiding the monstrous flamethrower he would retaliate and unleash upon them with. As Toto and his group began to recover, Toto had to open his cockpit to allow himself out along with Hong Ji-yu and assess the damage done to the Zangetsu. It seemed in pretty bad shape and would need extensive repairs, something they couldn't do right now. Colonel. Chiba landed her nightmare near the recovering group as Drift stood up with Urabe's Akatsuki hovering in front of them and keeping an eye on the battle. She immediately got out and ran toward him. Are you alright? I'll live, Toto assured. But I can't use my nightmare anymore. Our plan, it failed, Jetstorm said, almost as if he was conceding to defeat. We were to prevent Bruticus from forming and yet. That's exactly what happened, and now we're outmatched and, Zidane has, fallen, Safeguard said in the same tone. You guys, Urabe muttered, keeping an eye on the battle. He could tell that it was a losing battle. With a swipe from his arm, Bruticus had sent Windblade and Silverbolt crashing to the ground. He then shot his flamethrower toward Asahina and Senbei's nightmares, though they were able to avoid the worst of it. The flames still fried their float systems, forcing them to perform an emergency landing. All that was left was Jetfire as he flew in to fire more missiles, but Bruticus had blocked the missiles with his shield before quickly grabbing Jetfire in his free hand. Bruticus looked at the struggling Arielbot in his grip. I remember you. He recalled when Jetfire and Geass worked together to send Bruticus flying off the fleeing arc and crashing onto Cybertron's surface. Let's see how you like it. He threw Jetfire away, who tried to stabilize himself in his jet mode, but it didn't stop him from crashing all the way into the Great Wall, causing a portion of it to collapse. The Combaticon Combiner laughed as he reached down and tore open the metal crate behind him with his fingers before plucking the large chunk of red energon out. The chunk was big enough to fit in the palm of his hand. It was roughly the size of an average nightmare. Looks like I win. No, has the red energon. Shink exclaimed. Unfortunately, Drift fell to his legs in exhaustion. Nothing we have can stop this monster. I'm afraid that we have lost. No, we can't lose. Jetstorm stuttered in despair. There must be something. Safeguard said in the same desperate tone. Urabe thought for a moment, looking at the big chunk of red energon in Bruticus' hand. The readings off that were definitely higher than normal, possibly more explosive than regular energon. He knew they had a way to stop this. Their orders were not just to obtain the relic, but to destroy it if its acquisition was all but impossible. Even if we can't win this, we'll make sure they won't either. Hey, you two runts, Urabe got the attention of the two mini-cons. This was a good plan, don't beat yourselves up about it. Don't get too hung up over every little thing. Urabe, what are you saying? Safeguard asked. Colonel, Urabe got Todo's attention next. Tell Prime and Zero, it's been an honor serving with them. And an even greater honor to serve under you. Todo and Chiba's eyes both widened as they realized what he was implying. Urabe, don't. But it was too late, he had shot his Akatsuki straight toward Bruticus, much to their shock, as well as the rest of their group. Hey, big guy, Urabe shouted at Bruticus as his Akatsuki flew right at him. One last meatbag left, think ya can take me? Little bug. Bruticus unleashed his flamethrower onto the charging Akatsuki, the red energon held back in his free hand. Silverbolt, Windblade, Asahina, and Senba had all recovered, and even Jetfire from his spot at the collapsed area of the Great Wall, and they could all look in shock to see the flames beginning to overtake Urabe's Akatsuki. Time seemed to slow down for the member of the Four Holy Swords. Right before the flames would consume him, his sensors had already locked onto the red energon within Bruticus' grip. And with the pull of a switch, his Akatsuki fired a missile right at it. Almost as if it were in slow motion, the missile had flown out of the flames. Bruticus' optics widened as he saw it and where it was heading. He made a desperate attempt to break apart, but as the joints disconnected, the missile had impacted the red energon. Boom! Asterisk. The red energon erupted in a massive explosion, one powerful enough that sent the now detached Combaticons flying and would consume the near-destroyed Akatsuki. Urabe smiled and closed his eyes in acceptance as the explosion consumed him as well. The blast felt like a major earthquake that shook up the whole area, the shockwave blasting Todo's group back, with Drift using his own body to shield Jetstorm, Safeguard, Todo, Chiba, and Hong Ji-yu, while all the other surrounding bots and nightmares were also knocked back a bit. Jetfire gasped as he quickly transformed and flew back to help anyone who may still be there. Fire and smoke, that was all that seemed to be present in the massive crater that was the excavation site for the now non-existent red Enegron. Onslaught groaned as he tried to pull himself up. His body appeared to be mildly damaged, but nothing that was unfixable. Combaticons, report in. He needed to check on his team. Brawl and Blastoff were the first to step up, both appearing in the same shape as Onslaught. Oh man, that was something, Brawl said in a daze. Onslaught. Swindle called to his leader, who promptly ran to him and looked in shock to see Swindle standing over a critically injured Vortex. He appeared to be missing his right arm, left leg and a portion of his lower left side, energon leaking everywhere. He's in critical condition and needs medical attention. It only made sense. Vortex had formed Bruticus' left arm, which had been the hand that held the red energon. So, it was only natural that Vortex would take the worst of the blast, even if they did undeploy before the explosion. Those bots and their meatbag pets. I'm gonna vaporize them, Brawl yelled in a fury. No. Onslaught stopped him, putting a firm grip on his shoulder. But Onslaught. Brawl attempted to protest. The red energon has been destroyed. There's no point in fighting anymore. We're retreating, that's an order. Brawl growled further in annoyance. Fine. As Blastoff helped Swindle pick up the injured Vortex, Onslaught contacted the Nemesis. Soundwave, we need a ground bridge to the Nemesis med bay, we have a con down. A ground bridge portal opened near their location, most of the Combaticons already entered the portal. Onslaught turned around one last time in the general direction where he would see Todo and the others attempting to regroup. This isn't over, he thought to himself before walking into the portal, which closed soon after. All the remaining Autobots and Black Knights had regrouped, the humans stepping out from their respective nightmares as they recounted what had happened. The relic we've been seeking was Red Energon. Drift revealed to those who didn't quite know it yet. That explains the enormous explosion. Jetfire said. Red Energon has always been more unstable than its more common counterpart. Well, on the plus side, it means Megatron won't be able to use it now. Asahina said. That is true, Chiba acknowledged. Though she, Asahina, Todo, and Senba fell into a mournful silence for not just Urabe, but also Zidane as well as Air Raid. Jetfire, Silverbolt, and Windblade all followed suit as well, along with Drift. I am truly sorry for your loss. We all are, Shink told them, referring to himself and his companions, Joe and Hong Ji-yu. We may not have known them for very long, but they were true warriors. Joe said. It was an honor to fight alongside them. Hong Ji-yu added. Thank you. Windblade nodded. Nervously, Jetstorm and Safeguard walked toward Todo and his comrades, the only 3 remaining members of the 4 Holy Swords. Kiyoshiro Todo, Nagisa Chiba, Shogo Asahina, and Ryoga Senba, we offer our deepest condolences for the loss of Kosetsu Urabe. And our apologies, Jetstorm said as he and his fellow Minicon bowed. This was our plan, Safeguard continued. We had hoped we'd be able to isolate the Combaticons, preventing them from combing, and enable us to obtain the Red Energon with little to no chance of casualties, but it failed miserably. Not only were the Combaticons still able to combine, but they had struck down Zidane, and Urabe was forced into a situation where he had to sacrifice himself to achieve even a draw. Jetstorm added. We humbly beg your forgiveness, even though we are undeserving of it. Safeguard finished. There is nothing to forgive. Todo revealed, much to their surprise. Your plan was sound, and it did enable us a chance to retrieve the Red Energon. Though the Combaticons were indeed able to counter, you are not responsible for that, nor are you for Zidane's death or Urabe's sacrifice. This is war, and casualties are inevitable. Even those among our own side, as well as those closest to us. Senba said. Zidane's death was unfortunate, but there is nothing we can do to change that now. Chiba added. As for Urabe, it was his choice. Asahina said with some reluctance but acceptance as well. He made the choice to give his life so the enemy couldn't obtain a dangerous weapon. We may not have won, but neither have they. They speak the truth, my students. Drift added, walking up to address the Minicons. You acted wisely and bravely, utilizing our scattered and broken force and staging an efficient counterattack. However, one lesson that we must understand is that in warfare, not every plan we devise, no matter how thorough or brilliant, will go as we wish, which may even cost the lives of our allies. There will always be things outside our control. But what is important is not what we lose, but what we gain, be it a victory or a lesson learned. Even Optimus Prime has failed but has learned from that failure. For failure is the greatest teacher. So, give yourselves some credit. Silverbolt added. And while 3 of our own may be gone, and we'll probably lose more before this war is over, we can honor their sacrifice by continuing the fight. Would you agree? Safeguard and Jetstorm exchanged glances. Their guilt was still present, but it felt relieved a little to hear these words from their teacher and comrades. Thank you, and yes, we most certainly agree. Safeguard said. We will continue to fight and honor Air Raid, Urabe, Zidane, and all others who made the ultimate sacrifice, and prove that it wasn't for nothing. Jetstorm added. Excellent. Now then, it is time to return to base. Drift said. On it. Windblade opened their comm channel. This is Theta Team, we need a ground bridge as well as transportation. Most, if not all our nightmares are heavily damaged. Understood. Sending a ground bridge and a retrieval team to your coordinates immediately. Fix-It replied. In just a few short seconds, a ground bridge portal had opened up before the group as a few Black Knights with their nightmares exited to help begin transporting the more heavily damaged units Todo and the others had. During this process, Asahina walked up toward Safeguard and Jetstorm. So, felt like you pulled your own weight. We have. Safeguard replied with a nod. And we will continue to do so, in the hopes that our comrades' sacrifice was worth it. I know. Asahina smiled. I'm sure Urabe and the others would know that too. Does our interaction today mean you consider us your friend, Asahina? Jetstorm asked. Asahina laughed, much to their confusion. You guys say that like I never considered you my friends to begin with. This caused the 2 Minicons to smile excitedly before they bowed their heads to him in respect, which Asahina responded with the same gesture in friendship and respect. Nemesis Warship. The 4 Combaticons, after getting some patchwork treatment done to treat their minor injuries, remained outside the med bay as the medical staff continued to fix up Vortex. The doors opened up as a single scientist Viacon stepped out to address the group as they stood up straight. I have good news and better news. The good news is, Vortex will be back up on his feet pretty soon. The worst has been fixed up and his missing limbs should be replaced relatively easily. What's better news? Swindle asked. In your report, you said that you were handling red energon, isn't that right? Yeah, why? Brawl asked. The scientist Viacon produced a small glass container filled with a glowing red liquid, much to the Combaticon's surprise. Is that? Blastoff questioned. If I'm not mistaken, Vortex had formed the arm of Bruticus that had held the red energon, correct? Upon detonation some of its fragments must have gotten lodged into Vortex's body. During surgery, we were able to remove and process them. Though this is barely enough for a single dose at the absolute most, I would think that Shockwave could still find an effective use for it, don't you agree? Onslaught took the tiny sample of liquefied red energon in his hands and could only chuckle evilly. Oh yes, I imagine he would. Sword of the past, shield of the present. The Australian outback, a large region of the continent that was sparsely populated by any humans, and yet it was arguably one of the most beautiful places on Earth probably because of that. No energon deposits were located here, so the natural setting was all but undisturbed. That is until a ground bridge portal opened, allowing the Black Knight Autobot group known as Gamma Team to enter the Desert Mountain region. There were 7 units that made up this team, being led by Ultra Magnus with Geass and Prowl right behind him, alongside 4 Nightmares, 2 custom Vincents piloted by both Cornelia and Chigusa, Guilford's Akatsuki, and the Florence Nero operated by Monica Kruszewski. The portal closed as all 7 stepped out and began to survey the area, with Ultra Magnus already taking out a scanner to locate the relic. You know, there may not be a lot here, but this place is kinda beautiful. Monica observed with a slight smile. Perhaps, but we must remain focused on the mission. Ultra Magnus said. Commander Magnus, do you have any ideas what sort of relic we'll be retrieving? Guilford asked. Unfortunately, no. Ultra Magnus replied. Many Decepticon weapons of mass destruction were confiscated during the war and we didn't have time to destroy them all before Yakin was overwhelmed. What about one of this prime relics, like the Forge? Chigusa asked. That is a possibility as well. Prowl granted. As the Master Archivist was one of the original 13, it would make sense relics from his era were stored there. However, the coordinates only point to the relic's location. They do not say anything on what the relic is. Ultra Magnus said. That's not very helpful. Geass commented. Does it matter what it is? Cornelia asked. So long as we get to it first. I agree with Cornelia. Monica added. We find the relic and get back to base. If we're unable to do that, then we must destroy it. Well, in that case, it does matter what the relic is. Geass said. If it's a bomb, just trying to blow it up could blow a hole in the planet the size of the continent. All valid points. Ultra Magnus told the group. However, we will be unable to pursue either option if we do not locate the relic first. So where is it? Guilford asked. According to the coordinates taken from the Nemesis, our target appears to be located within that canyon range roughly 20 clicks from here. Ultra Magnus replied, looking at his scanner. Suddenly, multiple energon blasts rained down toward the group, much to their shock, as they saw several Insecticons flying down from the sky in their Herculean beetle modes, and they appeared to be led by 2 more Insecticons, one resembling a dark purple beetle and the other being a bright red firefly as they too opened fire on the group. As Gamma Team broke apart to avoid getting shot at due to being a bigger target, they attempted to retaliate and open fire. However, they didn't get very far as multiple bursts erupted from the ground around them, almost like a complete circle as several more Insecticons climbed out and emerged from the ground with roars. Among them was a giant metallic scorpion that transformed and revealed himself to be Scorponic. All the airborne Insecticons encircled the rest of Gamma Team in the air as the Beetle and Firefly transformed to reveal themselves as Saberhorn and Glowstrike respectively. It's an ambush, Guilford exclaimed. Indeed, it is. Saberhorn grinned. Not particularly sporting, but I'm not arguing with the results. Guess that Schneisel knew what he was talking about, Glowstrike commented. That got Cornelia's attention, her nightmare's radar picking up another airborne object in the far distance. Upon scanning it and zooming in, she saw that it was the Avalon. Schneisel. Her eyes lit with fury. The former Britannian prince-turned-human Decepticon ambassador sat on the command chair on board the Avalon as he observed the situation unfold before him. It seems the ambush worked as intended. Kanan told Schneisel. How did you know the enemy would appear here though? They could have used the ground bridge to teleport straight to the relic's location. I'm certain their commanders would want to keep them at a relatively safe distance with the terrain the relic is located in proves to be too treacherous. Lelouch has certainly been more cautious ever since his miraculous return. Schneisel explained. However, upon closer inspection, it would seem Cornelia is among this team. Even if her allegiance has changed, she is still likely to resist. Kanan, please instruct the Insecticons to bring her in alive. Alive, sir? Kanan asked. I've already had a chance to speak with Lelouch, Nunnally, and Euphemia, all of whom I was rather close with. It's only fair I give Cornelia the chance to, as we did have a similar relationship. Schneisel answered. Understood. Kanan nodded as he began to deliver the orders to the Insecticons below, while Schneisel continued to observe as he was certain a fight would break out at any second. You are surrounded. Though it is highly recommended you surrender, I hope that you do not. Saberhorn said with a grin as he drew his dual fencing blades. I so long for a challenge. Geass grinned back. Good, cause you're about to get one. He shot his sonic gun at Saberhorn to blast him into a group of Insecticons. The others followed suit as Ultra Magnus and Prowl opened fire with their Energon blasters while the four Nightmares took to the sky and fired their missiles and other heavy artillery weapons to take down a good portion of the Insecticons. Many of them then took to the skies in pursuit of the Nightmares while the Autobots dealt with the remainder of enemies around them. Ultra Magnus fired his ion cannons to blast off one Insecticon's head before drawing his Energon hammer to slam it into the side of the second to knock it down, allowing him to crush its head with another hammer strike. However, he was quickly attacked by Scorponic, who lashed out with his claws at the Autobot commander. Fortunately, Magnus blocked the claw strikes with the staff of his hammer even as the scorpion-like Insecticon pressed against him. Geass used his grappler to hook onto the face of one Insecticon and pull himself upward. While airborne, Geass deployed Undertone, who fell and drew his spear to impale into the back of the Insecticon's neck to kill him. Undertone undeployed back onto Geass just as he unleashed another sonic blast to push back another Insecticon. A third was about to come at him from behind in its beetle mode, but Prowl suddenly appeared to thrust his knee into its neck area to disorient it before throwing several of his shuriken into its exposed neck to finish it off. Geass gave an impressed whistle. Smooth there, buddy. Where would we be without ya? Suddenly, 4 Insecticons total landed in front of the Autobot pair and gave their titular roars. We may find out, Prowl commented before he and his companion engaged the enemy. While in the air, Cornelia, Guilford, Chigusa, and Monica flew in their respective Nightmares to shoot at any Insecticon that tried to come their way, using whatever gun or Harken attack to maintain their distance and avoid close quarters combat with the hulking Insecticons. As Cornelia's Vincent fired its riffle at the wings of one Insecticon to send it falling to the ground, she once again paid a glance towards the Avalon, noting that it wasn't taking part in the battle. Always observing but never taking part yourself. Cornelia thought with disgust. How much like our father you are, Schneisel. Suddenly, Cornelia's Vincent was rammed from behind by Saberhorn's flying beetle mode, who drove it toward the ground. Cornelia! Guilford exclaimed as he flew after them. Guilford, wait. Monica was about to provide assistance, but 3 Insecticons flew out in front of her and opened fire, forcing her to fly upward and avoid the blasts, while at the same time, Chigusa found herself engaged with Glowstrike's Firefly alt mode. Both flew through the sky as they fired their long-ranged weapons at one another. Cornelia's custom Vincent was knocked to the ground and skidded to a halt as Saberhorn transformed and appeared over her. He glanced behind to see Guilford's Akatsuki flying down toward him as it drew its revolving blade sword and slashed at him, only for Saberhorn to quickly draw one of his own blades to block and parry, swinging forward to push Guilford's unit back. Saberhorn was also quick to draw his other blade and parry the thrust from Cornelia's lance as her Nightmare rushed past him and regrouped with Guilford's. It seems I am granted a challenge after all. Saberhorn grinned. This may be your last, Decepticon. Cornelia glared. Ah, that voice, you are Cornelia Lee Britannia, former princess of the now fallen Britannia and so-called goddess of victory. Saberhorn recognized her. And I'm assuming the other is a friend, most likely. Perhaps someone of your former guard. If that is true, then perhaps your teamwork shall make this even more exciting. Come and face me. Prove your mettle. I'll follow your lead, as always, Cornelia. Guilford told her. I know, she smiled slightly, glad he was watching her back before they both moved to engage Saberhorn in bladed combat. Still airborne, Monica's Florence Nero fired its hadron cannons to obliterate two of the Insecticons that charged at her, but a third appeared and came at her faster than she could react, ramming at her with its horn to knock her down toward the ground. That same Insecticon transformed and landed in front of her, raising its fists to crush her. But an energon hook appeared to ensnare its neck from behind. The one responsible was revealed to be Geass as he pulled back to get the Insecticon's attention. Hey! Anytime you wanna move, Geass told Monica. Quickly using this chance, she drove her nightmare forward, drawing its MVS claws to impale the Insecticon's chest and destroy it. Thanks, Geass. Monica nodded. No problemo. Geass nodded back. Now let's get back to the fight. They quickly moved in to try and assist Prowl and Ultra Magnus as they continued to struggle against their respective opponents. Back in the air, Chigusa fired her Vincent's rifle at the flying alt mode of Glowstrike, but she was too fast to get a solid hit in. She flew straight up and back down to open fire with her own energon blasts. Though Chigusa tried to move out of the way, her float system was struck, sending her nightmare plummeting toward the ground. Though she was able to somewhat stabilize herself upon landing, it didn't stop Glowstrike from ramming the Vincent to the ground. Ha! Parry! Saberhorn blocked the sword strike from Guilford's Akatsuki and kicked it back before swerving around to avoid the lance strike from Cornelia. Thrust. He lunged his right blade at Cornelia, who batted it away before getting some distance with a vault from her /Harkins on the ground, allowing Guilford to come in and engage Saberhorn in close quarters combat. But he was quick to parry all his strikes. Parry. Parry. Thrust. However, it would seem Guilford had Saberhorn's complete attention. Even as Cornelia rolled her Vincent forward at high speeds, Guilford didn't move until the last second, flying upward just in time as Cornelia lunged her Vincent's lance at Saberhorn. However, he was even quicker to limbo under the strike, cross the lance with both his blades and use the Vincent's own momentum to his advantage as he used his own strength to flip the Vincent over himself to knock it to the ground. Ha! Well played. Saberhorn granted. Your teamwork is certainly exceptional, but not enough to defeat me. Though I am surprised by the camaraderie of former Britannians, especially considering the royals always sought to overthrow one another. You don't know the first thing about the royal family. Guilford stated as he went on the attack, but Saberhorn blocked his nightmare's sword with ease. Oh, Schneisel up there has told me quite a bit, actually. Saberhorn replied, getting Cornelia's attention as he kicked Guilford's Akatsuki back. Though a handful of you may have gotten along, a large majority of the royal family sought the throne for themselves, the late Clovis being among them as he resorted to human experimentation. Assassination was also a common regard among your families in fighting, and that's not even taking into account all the nobility that tried to steal from royalty. Cornelia attacked Saberhorn in a rage, thrusting her nightmare's lance again, but Saberhorn parried and swerved around easily enough. Though you claim to fight with honor, your empire has been anything but. Those power only sought more power and would resort to even the most heinous of methods to achieve it. You're one to talk, Cornelia exclaimed. You Decepticons destroyed your own home planet. True, Saberhorn acknowledged, but at least we accept and admit it. Wasn't your old empire attempting to do the same thing? Deny it all you want, but Britannia would have ultimately destroyed the Earth the same way we had for Cybertron. Both Cornelia and Guilford attacked at the same time, thrusting lance and slashing sword, but Saberhorn blocked both blades as he locked against them. Your actions suggest you are defending your empire, and yet you bear the emblem of its antithesis, do you not? He flapped his wings and hovered above them slightly before spinning his blades around like a top to push them both back. He then quickly severed the left leg of Cornelia's Vincent and brought it down. The Autobots and their Black Knights compatriots claim that freedom is the right of all sentient beings, while the old Britannia believed that freedom was reserved solely for the powerful. Saberhorn continued, even as Cornelia tried to lunge her Vincent's lance forward in defiance, but Saberhorn quickly avoided it before severing the entire arm and did the same for the second. The two factions couldn't be more opposite. Yet you bear the emblem of one and try to defend the other, despite being enemies. He severed the Vincent's head and kicked the unit to the ground. If that does not count as hypocrisy, then I do not know what does. Cornelia. Guilford tried to zoom forward and provide assistance, but an Insecticon appeared in front of him and grabbed his Akatsuki before slamming it to the ground. However, Prowl flipped up and over the Insecticon form behind, slashing a shuriken into its eyes to blind it before kicking it down and grabbed Guilford's Akatsuki to pull it out of the way. Meanwhile, Scorponic continued to press against Ultra Magnus in a contest of strength, his claws against Magnus' hammer. Unfortunately for the Autobot commander, Scorponic had slowly positioned his tail at the right position from his side, before slashing upward to completely break the Energon hammer. He then grabbed Magnus by his shoulders with his pincers and slammed him to the ground. To think I'd be the one to put the mighty Ultra Magnus out of his misery. Scorponic sneered as he waved his tail, ready to go in for the kill. Sorry to disappoint. Ultra Magnus quickly transformed into his vehicle mode to push Scorponic off. He transformed back and grabbed Scorponic by the tail and spun around before throwing him away. However, as Ultra Magnus looked around the battlefield, he saw that the rest of Gamma Team wasn't doing so well. Cornelia's Vincent had been cut to pieces, Glowstrike had likewise torn up the Vincent piloted by Chigusa. Prowl and Guilford were cornered by 3 Insecticons while 6 more had surrounded Geass and Monica. Ultra Magnus even saw the Avalon was looming closer, its weapons were already primed and ready. It was time to go. All units, retreat. Fall back into the canyon for cover. Ultra Magnus ordered. What? Guilford exclaimed. But Cornelia. Gilbert, go. Cornelia ordered him. You have to leave. We can't win like this. I can't. He attempted to protest, but Prowl had already picked up his Akatsuki and begun to run away. Geass. Prowl called for his fellow Autobot as Monica fired the Florence Nero's Hadrons, killing 2 Insecticons instantly and blasting the side off a third to kill it as well and clear a path for them. I'm on it. Geass launched his Energon grappler to pull Guilford's Nightmare toward him as he and Prowl transformed into their respective vehicle modes. Sorry, man. Geass apologized to Guilford as they drove away. No. Cornelia. Guilford cried out as his Nightmare was literally towed and dragged away, regrouping with Ultra Magnus as he transformed as well, Monica's Nightmare flying with them. They would quickly make it to the canyons, where it would be difficult for the enemy to follow them. Though the Insecticons were ready to give pursuit. No. Scorponic halted them. Schneisel's orders. Let them go. They'll lead us to the relic. What about this one? Glowstrike asked as she gestured Chigusa's torn Vincent. We were ordered to capture Cornelia. Should we terminate the extra? No. Saberhorn shook his head. Let's take them both, just in case. He grinned down toward the dismembered Vincent piloted by Cornelia, who glared from within her cockpit, even more so as the Avalon's shadow loomed over them. Your brother has been most anxious to see you again. The remainder of Gamma Team had managed to find a relatively secure position within a ravine inside the canyon to try and revise their situation. Guilford and Monica had stepped out of their respective nightmares to assess the damage while Geass, Undertone, and Prowl kept watch for any sign of enemy activity as Ultra Magnus looked at this scanner to pinpoint the position of the relic. Damage appears to be only minimal. Monica reported. We can still fight with our nightmares. Doesn't look like the bad guys are following us either. Geass said. Perhaps because they weren't ordered to. Prowl commented. They could be using us to excavate the relic for them. If Schneisel is involved with this, I'm not surprised. Sounds like a move he'd make. Monica commented, looking away with disdain at the mention of the former prince. It would indeed appear we are closer to the location of the relic. Ultra Magnus said, looking at his scanner. A few clicks further into this ravine should allow us to reach its location. What about our own who have been captured? Guilford exclaimed. We've just lost 2 of our own. We have to devise a plan to rescue them. That may just be what the enemy intends. Ultra Magnus countered. Our captured allies could simply act as bait, a means to lure us into a situation where they have complete advantage. But if we keep going along this path, we'll still just be leading Schneisel and the Insecticons straight to the relic. Prowl said. Either way, the enemy has complete control over the situation. Damn, gotta give Snazy Boy up their credit. He'd definitely give Zero a run for his money in the strategy department. Geass commented. So that's it then? Guilford questioned. We just give up. Let the enemy take the relic in our own. No. We need to devise a counter-strategy of our own. Ultra Magnus commented. One that will enable us to retrieve the relic. But what about Cornelia? Or Chigusa? Guilford questioned. We can't just abandon them. Our mission is to secure the relic, first and foremost. The Autobot commander insisted. If we have an opportunity to rescue the prisoners, we'll take it. But it is not our first priority. Not our priority. Guilford looked in shock. What the commander is trying to say is, that we need a solid plan. Geass stepped in before tensions could rise any further. Look Gil, I wanna rescue them as badly as you do. But is right. We don't know what we're looking for. Worst case scenario, it could be a bomb that can probably blow up the whole planet. We can't let the cons get something like that. I agree. Monica stepped forward. I'm sorry Guilford, but depending on what we're looking for, potentially billions of innocent people could be put at risk if the enemy gets it. What do you think Cornelia would do if she was in your position? Guilford looked away, seeing the validity of their argument, and he knew exactly what Cornelia would do if their situations were reversed. She would do her duty. With the tension appearing to calm down, Ultra Magnus got them back on task. We need to move. But first, we need to know everything about this Schneisel if we are to plan a proper counter-strategy. Schneisel is arguably the greatest strategist of our former empire. Monica began. But if he has a flaw, I'd probably say it's that he's not a fighter. He always leads from the back, he never directly participates in battle. Well, he is also currently within an advanced airship that is likely armed with advanced weaponry. Prowl said. One that would be difficult to breach. We do have two of our own inside that thing, though. Geass said. Maybe Cornelia and Chigusa might escape on their own and do some damage on the inside. Perhaps, but it is not something we can control from here. Ultra Magnus said. For now, let us move to retrieve the relic, and we can hopefully devise a strategy to secure it should the enemy attack again. Monica and Guilford entered their respective nightmares once more and proceeded down the ravine with their Autobot allies, Ultra Magnus at the lead. As they went on, Guilford glanced behind in the direction the enemy was, and likely where Cornelia was being held. Cornelia, please, be safe. Speaking of Cornelia, she had been taken aboard the Avalon and confined to a cell within the flying vessel. All her weapons were taken from her, including any hidden blades, and she was thoroughly strapped to a chair that was built into the floor. Her hands strapped behind her back while more straps bound her upper body to the chair itself. Her ankles were also strapped together with her legs similarly strapped to the chair. She was even unable to speak as well with a rubber muzzle wrapped over her mouth. Glancing toward her right, Chigusa was in the exact same state, bound and strapped to the chair. The only thing that separated the pair was a wall of thick bulletproof plexiglass, the same kind that separated their cells from the rest of the room. The only thing they were capable of doing was sharing eye contact, as it seemed impossible for either of them to escape at the moment. The door outside the brig slid open to reveal Schneisel with a pair of guards. Upon seeing him again, both women glared as hard as they could at him, though he kept his seemingly civil expression. Open it up and remove their gags. I wish to speak with my sister. Schneisel ordered. Yes, sir. They opened the cell doors and removed the muzzles, but nothing more. Schneisel had brought in a chair that allowed himself to sit on equal level with his sister as the guards left the room. It's been a while, Cornelia. I remember the last time we met was before you helped Megatron in destroying Pendragon. Cornelia interrupted out of spite. Or how you helped in kidnapping and replacing Yuffie with a machine to start a massacre. What happened with Yuffie and at the special zone was not my intent. Schneisel replied. I was unaware of what Megatron was planning back then. I explained this to Yuffie before, along with Nunnally and even Lelouch. I would have thought they told you about that. But you knew they would do something, didn't you? Chigusa spoke up. And that time you spoke to them. It was during an assault that could have gotten all those civilians we rescued killed. She exclaimed, referring to the Battle of the Ark. Ah, Valletta knew, correct. He addressed the other prisoner. This is the first time we've met. If I recall, you were an esteemed member of the pureblood faction founded by Jeremiah Gottwald. You were previously under the command of my late brother, Clovis. That is until that whole orange mess came up and your unit had lost everything, as well as most of its members during Narita, essentially making you and Jeremiah the sole survivors. You've done your research, I see. Chigusa narrowed her eyes. Though I am left somewhat confused. Schneisel continued. The pureblood faction was considered the most patriotic of the Britannian army, particularly in how they feel. Pure Britannians should have all the power. The Black Knights and the Autobots claimed to fight for the freedom of all, so they'd be natural enemies. And yet, you chose to side with them. People change, Schneisel. Cornelia told him. Some for the better, others for the worse. And you believe I fall into the later category. Schneisel assumed. I trusted you, while most of our siblings fought each other to try and take the throne. You harbored no hostility toward us. Cornelia looked at him with an expression that mixed anger and grief. Myself, Yuffie, Lelouch, Nunnally, even Maribel, we all trusted you. And you threw us all aside to gain favor with Megatron. She yelled. I apologize for the grief my actions have caused you, dear sister. Schneisel said, appearing to sound sincere. But, as you have been with Lelouch and his new friends for some time, you've probably come to see things through their perspective as well. And it is that exact same viewpoint that led to me turning on Britannia. Because we would have destroyed the world, right? Cornelia questioned. Exactly. Schneisel confirmed. Our father was an uncompromising warmonger. Any attempts at making peace were met with bloodshed. He showed no remorse with each declaration of war he'd deliver, and many of our siblings were like that as well, Guinevere, even Carney as young as she was. And you were like that as well, Cornelia. You were a sword meant to strike down all those that defied our father. I recall you yourself leading many massacres, and they weren't all necessarily enemy soldiers. I'm aware of what you tried to do in Saitama. Though the Autobots and Lelouch were able to evacuate all its civilians, you would have gunned them down without hesitation, wouldn't you? You were incredibly patriotic in Britannia's ways, so much so you wholeheartedly disagreed with Yuffie's choice in establishing the special zone. Because what good is a goddess of victory, if there is no more need for war? Are you trying to make me feel guilty? Cornelia questioned. Trying to get inside my head and shove all my past sins back in my face. I know what I've done, all of it. I live with it every single day. I've killed people weaker than me, I even tried to hurt my brother, but I'm not going to dwell on all of that and drown myself in my guilt and self-pity. I'm going to do everything I can to make things right. I am no longer loyal to Britannia, my loyalty is toward the family and siblings that I love, and that no longer includes you. A look of disappointment fell on Schneisel's face. I am truly sorry to hear that. I never wanted you to hate me, Cornelia. You should have thought of that before you not only sided but remained with Megatron. Chigusa told him. I'm sure Euphemia or even Nunnally tried to offer you a choice to join our side, but you turned them down. Initially, yes. But who is to say it should remain that way? What are you talking about? Chigusa questioned. However, Cornelia was able to figure it out. One look in his eyes told her everything. You're not really serving him, are you? She said with a soft surprise of realization. You're plotting to overthrow him. Schneisel need only give an ambitious smile to all but confirm it. What makes you sure he won't see it coming? Because he is too focused on Lelouch and Optimus. Schneisel replied. Their recent success in bringing the EU, Euro-Britannia, and Chinese Federation over to their side has caused Megatron to fixate on them. Their combined military force does indeed outnumber the Decepticons, and if they manage to secure a handful of these Yakin relics, that'll just have Megatron focus even more on them. So, you plan to betray Megatron as well. And what, you become the new Emperor of Earth or something? Chigusa said spitefully. Or something, he replied. Unlike Megatron or my father, I have no interest in becoming the sole ruler of the planet or the universe. I just want all conflict in this world to end. Megatron has already more than humbled humanity with the complete destruction of Britannia, and Lelouch and Optimus have raised their spirits again and given them hope. Hope for a world where there is no more conflict, and we can make that happen together. I have a plan in place that will guarantee Megatron's destruction. If you were to get me in contact with them, I can share this information with Optimus and Lelouch and we can have the peaceful world that we also desire. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness for my actions so I won't ask for it, but that doesn't mean we can't set things right together. He smiled toward her. Cornelia, will you help me? Will you help me in finally bringing peace to Earth? She remained silent for a moment before giving her answer. I don't believe you. Pardon. I said don't believe you. Cornelia told him. All you've ever done is betray and use us. You betrayed your nation and our father when you sided with Megatron. You betrayed me and our family when you refused to truly help them. And now you're going to betray Megatron himself. What's to say you won't try and betray us all over again? And before you ask what you would gain from that, you'd remove the only ones who are capable of standing against you. You'd even find a way to use them as martyrs to further support your twisted plan. I don't know what kind of world of peace you envision, but it's not the one we're striving for. I won't help you, and whatever it is you are planning, I know for certain that they will stop you. Lelouch, Optimus, they will crush your plot and I will give them everything I have to help them. I may have been a sword of Britannia in the past, but now I am the shield that will protect my siblings from anyone who would harm them. Even you. Schneisel stood up, a look of disappointment on his face. Does she speak for you too, Miss New? He asked Chigusa. Yes, she does. Oh, and my name is Chigusa. I don't go by Villette New anymore. I see, very well then. He pressed a button under his collar, signaling the guards to enter the brig again. Once we retrieve the relic, you'll take into New Count. I was hoping to avoid that route, but the Decepticons have a way to retrieve knowledge directly from an enemy's mind. It's not exactly something I approve of, but it may be necessary here. The guards placed the muzzles back over Cornelia and Chigusa's mouths as they lowered the glass door and sealed their cells up. I truly wish it wouldn't have to be this way, sister. Schneisel told her as he turned around to leave. I am sorry, honestly. No, you're not. Cornelia thought to herself as she and Chigusa were once again left alone. Unable to speak once more, they made eye contact through the glass wall that separated them as they tried to formulate a plan for escape. She may no longer have her weapons, but Cornelia was still far from helpless. Her hands were still bound together, her fingers unrestrained, and that was all that she needed. The rest of Gamma Team had made it to their intended destination, a seeming dead end in the canyon area, and immediately begun excavating with Monica's Florence Nero digging away at the stone walls with her MVS claws that spun around almost like a drill. Geass, Undertone, and Prowl continued to survey the area for any sign of the enemy as Ultra Magnus and Guilford's Vincent remained close. Keep your eyes peeled. When we see the enemy, follow the plan. Ultra Magnus told the group. Understood. Prowl nodded along with Undertone. You got it. Geass smirked. Guilford briefly deactivated his nightmare and opened the cockpit as he addressed the Autobot commander. Commander Magnus, sir. I wish to apologize for my tone earlier. I respect you as not only the leader of this team, but also the commander of the elite guard I am assigned to. It wasn't my place to question you. Ultra Magnus gave Guilford his attention. While your tone itself was rather unprofessional, your reasoning behind it was sound. You were concerned for your comrades, one of whom you have had a personal history with. You served under Cornelia's unit when you were both in the Britannian army, her personal knight if I recall. That is correct, Guilford confirmed. I'm also the only survivor of the Glaston Knights. I'm aware of that as well. Magnus said. I swore loyalty to Princess Cornelia, Guilford continued. And yes, I am aware now that Britannia is gone, and she has renounced her status as royalty. I have come to terms with all of that and accepted it. But, that does not change the fact that I am still loyal to her, not as a knight to a princess but as a comrade and friend. I failed once before. You are referring to the battle in the Tokyo settlement that preceded the fall of Britannia. Ultra Magnus said. I've been told what had happened there and I wouldn't necessarily say it was your failure. Megatron had replaced Euphemia with a drone to initiate a massacre. Cornelia had deduced this and challenged Megatron, leading to her capture. You were deceived into believing the Autobots and Black Knights had taken her captive, which led to you taking your part in that conflict. Those events were outside your control. I'm aware of that, Guilford acknowledged. Still doesn't change what happened. Ever since, I made a personal vow to myself that I would not let her down again. But now, it seems I already have. He looked down in guilt. She's been taken by the enemy along with another one of her own, and I couldn't do a damn thing to help her. Ultra Magnus' normally stoic look softened only slightly. I am doubtful Schneisel will have either of them executed. Based on what I have heard, he seems the practical type and would see her as well as Chigusa as sources of information, thus he'd see a greater advantage in keeping them alive. Perhaps even as a bargaining chip for Cornelia given how close she is to Zero now. If we have an opportunity to rescue them, I give you my word we will take it. As idealistic as it may be to leave no soldier behind, this is still war, and in war, many things are outside our control, and it requires us to make difficult and even impossible choices. Have you ever made a choice like that? Guilford asked. One that would, lead to the end of a soldier of yours. I have, many times. Ultra Magnus admitted with reluctance. As has Optimus. Despite that, I am confident we will see our comrades again, whether we are able to rescue them, or they are able to rescue themselves. Though he was still greatly concerned for Cornelia as well as Chigusa, this did help Guilford in relieving something of the burden from his shoulders. It felt good to confide in a fellow solider like this, one he knew spoke from experience. Initially, he only as the Autobots as enemies to Cornelia as well as Britannia, though there were instances where he developed a begrudging respect toward them. But now, having fought alongside them, for a cause that was bigger than even his former empire, as well as their acceptance of him and other former Britannians into their ranks with little to no animosity, he would confidently call them his brothers and sisters in arms and would follow them into hell if he had to. Britannia was gone and he was no longer a knight of the Empire, but a Black Knight and ally to the Autobots, a title he now wore with pride. I think I found it. Monica announced, getting all their attention. The Florence Nero pulled away as much of the rocks and ground were cleared out, revealing something metallic underneath. Stepping forward, Ultra Magnus reached forward with both hands to pull out the large object. It was a large semi-triangular shaped shield-like object, one that also bore a shape resembling that of a fighter jet. Its outer lining was a brilliant golden color with a silver lining toward the middle, and a blue crest at the very center of it. It appears to be a shield, Guilford noted. Not just any. Ultra Magnus said as he held the shield with one hand. I recognize it from the Hall of Records, this is the Skyboom shield. Geass and Prowl, even Undertone, looked in shock. No freaking way. Are you serious? Geass exclaimed. I've never imagined I'd see such a relic up close, even Prowl was in awe. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I don't quite understand. Monica said. What's so special about this shield? The Skyboom shield was forged by Solus Prime. Ultra Magnus revealed, causing Guilford and Monica to look in surprise. Though I have never seen its power in action myself, Alpha Trion told me it has the power to protect even against cataclysmic level attacks. Incredible, Guilford's eyes wavered. Though one would think it was an exaggeration, but after everything he's seen involving Cybertronian technology, he'd be inclined to believe anything. If it's a relic of the Primes, am I right to assume it can only be wielded by a Prime? Like that forge? Monica asked. You would assume correctly. Ultra Magnus confirmed, which is why it is prudent we return it to base as quickly as possible, after of course, we deal with the enemy. Unsurprising, Gamma Team gazed up the canyon wall to see Scorponic, Saberhorn, Glowstrike, and 6 Insecticons looming over them with the Avalon hovering overhead. It would seem they were expecting us. Glowstrike commented. Scorponic scoffed. It won't change a thing. We'll still crush them and claim our prize. A relic of the Primes, Saberhorn grinned. Lord Megatron will be pleased. As Gamma Team got ready, Ultra Magnus put the shield away, attaching it to his back as he gazed up directly at the Avalon. Schneisel, if you can hear me, I must say that I am quite disappointed. Aboard the Avalon's bridge, Schneisel could indeed hear Ultra Magnus as the central screen zoomed in on the Autobot commander. I heard you were quite the strategist, one to rival even our leaders. And yet your plan to allow us to excavate the relic while you send your forces to take it is rather elementary. Even a first-cycle cadet would come up with a plan like that. I believe he is, taunting you, sir. Kanan told Schneisel as he remained sitting in his command chair. Or more likely, he is challenging me. Schneisel replied. While I do not know this Ultra Magnus personally, if he was worthy enough for Optimus to select him as his second in command during the war for Cybertron, then he may be a worthy opponent as well. Tell the Insecticons to move in and secure the relic, we'll see what Commander Magnus' next move is. As you wish. Kanan bowed. Having received their orders from Schneisel, the Insecticons opened fire on Gamma Team, prompting them to run from their spot and back through the ravine they recently traveled through. Once they got to a certain point, where the path diverged into three, Ultra Magnus exchanged nods with Prowl and Geass as Undertone rode on the latter's shoulder. Guilford and Monica received the signal as well. The group split up into three. Prowl transformed and moved down the path on the left with the Florence Nero following behind him, while Geass transformed as Undertone attached to him and drove down the right path with Guilford's Akatsuki rolling alongside him. Ultra Magnus transformed as well and drove down the middle path all alone. Split up. Don't let any of them escape. Scorponic ordered as Saberhorn, Glowstrike, and the 6 Insecticons all transformed into their respective insect modes and flew down their separate paths while Scorponic also transformed and quickly dug underground. Prowl's vehicle mode and the Florence Nero rode quickly through the narrow ravine with Glowstrike and 2 Insecticons flying above them, trying to shoot at them. However, the narrow ravine also provided efficient cover. Acting quickly, Monica turned the Florence Nero around and fired its Harkins to clear away some of the cover just as she fired the Hadron cannons once again. One Insecticon was completely obliterated, leaving only Glowstrike and the remaining Insecticon. Scrap. We can't get them up here. Cut them off. Glowstrike ordered. That one Insecticon quickly flew forward and into the ravine, transforming to land and block Prowl's path as he too transformed to face the Insecticon, the Florence Nero coming back to back with him as Glowstrike faced the Nightmare. Shall we? Monica said with anticipation. Yes. Prowl confirmed as they engaged the enemy. Ultra Magnus vehicle mode also continued along his path as 2 Insecticons flew down to try and get to him. One happened to fly rather close and into the canyon, just as Magnus had hoped for. He quickly transformed and fired his ion blaster at its wings, crippling it and causing it to fall toward him. Magnus was quick to pull out the Skyboom shield and use it as a blunt shield to not only protect himself from the crashing Insecticon but also push it off him and into the wall before fishing off said Insecticon with an Energon blast to its face. The second Insecticon had transformed and landed in front of Ultra Magnus. It roared at him as it tried to bring its metallic fist down on him, but Magnus quickly used the Skyboom shield to block the strike while also decking the Insecticon with his own fist and knocking it into the wall before he jammed the narrower end of the shield into the Insecticon's neck with enough force to completely crush it, killing the Insecticon. The Autobot commander heard the sounds of drilling from down under and quickly moved out of the way as Scorponic dug his way out from the ground and transformed to face him. "You're pretty handy with that thing, are ya?" Scorponic observed. "I may not be a prime, but I can still put this to some practical use," Ultra Magnus said as he brandished the Skyboom shield. "And I will enjoy prying it from your cold and lifeless shell," Scorponic stated before going on the attack. At the same time, Jazz's vehicle mode moved along with Guilford's Akatsuki down their chosen path. Though it was quickly blocked by 2 Insecticons as they landed in front of the pair. But due to the narrow ravine they were in, both Insecticons were lined in single file. On the other end, Saberhorn appeared and transformed to face the Nightmare in front of him. "Can you handle those two?" Guilford asked Geass, who transformed and deployed Undertone. "You need to ask." Geass grinned, causing Guilford to smirk in response as they faced their respective opponents. "You ready, little buddy?" Undertone nodded in confirmation before he and Geass engaged the Insecticons, leaving Guilford alone to face Saberhorn. "You wish to face me one-on-one?" Saberhorn asked Guilford. "Certainly sporting of you, but I recall both you and the former princess together weren't enough to match me." "You were right about before," Guilford told him, causing Saberhorn to look in confusion. "I was indeed a loyal soldier of Britannia, and me working alongside the Autobots and Black Knights now does make me seem like a hypocrite. But I've come to terms with all that's happened, including my past sins and failures. It doesn't matter what I was in the past, here now in the present, I am a Black Knight and it is my duty to protect this world, this whole world, from the likes of you." His Akatsuki drew its sword. Saberhorn looked rather impressed with that declaration. Acceptance of one's own past and using it to better your future. Quite honorable. He drew one of his blades and pointed it at the Nightmare. "Forgive me, but I do not believe I got your name before, Black Knight." I am Gilbert G. Guilford. A pleasure, I am Saberhorn. He drew his second blade. As a sign of my respect, I shall grant you a fight in death worthy of a fellow warrior. On guard. They clashed blades once more. Back in the Avalon's holding cell, Cornelia had already dislocated her right index and middle fingers, which was enough for her to slip her right hand through the restraints, while also losing it up on her left hand, freeing both. Grunting under her muzzle briefly as she reset her digits, she proceeded to quickly undo her bonds. The still-bound Chigusa watched as her comrade was able to free herself. Cornelia turned to her with a nod, saying she would be free soon, to which Chigusa nodded in understanding. Cornelia then delivered a fierce kick to the back of the chair she was restrained to, breaking and kicking off the back of it. As she picked up the broken piece, she saw the guards quickly enter the hold. Hey! One aimed its gun at her cell as the other opened the door, but that was a mistake as Cornelia quickly threw the piece of the chair she held at the guard before he could shoot, knocking him down. Before the other could react, Cornelia rushed him to knock his gun out of his hands before punching him down. She quickly grabbed the downed gun and shot to kill both guards. With that all settled, Cornelia opened Chigusa's adjacent cell and quickly freed her. Are you all right? I'm fine. Chigusa confirmed, a small grin forming on her face. You say you're no longer the goddess of victory, but you still seem pretty unstoppable to me. Cornelia gave a humorous smile in response before getting back to the mission at hand as they collected the guards' guns for themselves. Even if the Decepticons have upgraded the Avalon, the ship's layout should still be the same. Find one of the engines and disable it, send this piece of scrap metal crashing to the ground. Cornelia instructed. What are you going to do? Chigusa asked. With a serious expression, one even more so than any she had previous worn in service to Britannia, she gave her answer as she cocked her newly acquired gun. I'm going to have a word with my brother. Prowl may not have much room to work with in the narrow ravine, but neither did the hulking Insecticon in front of him as it frequently bashed its sides and arms against the rocky and uneven walls. This allowed Prowl to move in multiple quick and precise strikes across the Insecticon's body, and it was unable to do anything to counter him. It was even helpless as Prowl slid underneath its body, unable to turn around as the ninja bot pulled out two shurikens for close-range use, which he used to stab into the back of the Insecticon's neck and kill it. Meanwhile, Monica's Florence Nero lunged its MVS blades at Glowstrike, who was forced on the defensive as she tried to leap backwards. Oh no you don't. Monica fired her Nightmares/Harkins at the canyon walls on the left side behind Glowstrike, bringing down several rocks to cut off her path and prevent her retreat, allowing the Florence Nero to get in close with its MVS blades, which she tried to shield herself from with her arms, only for them both to be severed before Monica finished her off with a decapitation slice. Scorponic swung his claws at Ultra Magnus, but the commander was able to block all the strikes with the Skyboom shield. Though he was no prime and unable to use the shield's fullest potential, it still served as an effective literal shield as Scorponic's strikes couldn't so much as scratch it. Ultra Magnus pressed forward, pushing with the shield to send him back to the walls. Magnus then tried to drive the pointed end of the shield into him, but Scorponic quickly rolled out of the way just as shield impacted the wall. Acting quickly, Scorponic thrusted his tail forward, but Magnus was able to catch it with his free hand and pull in Scorponic, allowing him to strike the scorpion-like Insecticon with the blunt end of the shield before declaring a roundhouse kick to knock him further back, skidding across the ground. Wiping some energon from his mouth, Scorponic was smart enough to realize he was outmatched and decided to retreat. He transformed into his Scorpion alt mode again and tunneled underground to escape. Though Ultra Magnus was the clear victor, he was still hoping to capture the enemy. Regardless, the outcome was still satisfactory as he still had the Skyboom shield in his possession. Geass fired multiple concentrated blasts at the two Insecticons that were forced to line up single file while facing him. The repeated blasts forced the first one to back repeatedly into the second, both unable to counter, and were forced to trip up and over each other. While they were down, Undertone quickly moved to draw a spear and drive it in between the optics of the first. However, the second Insecticon underneath didn't seem to care all that much about his brethren as he dug his claws into his back and ripped him apart, burrowing through his back before emerging from the torn metallic carcass. No honor among bugs, eh? Geass cracked as he grappled the Insecticon's face with his energon hook, pulling him in close to where he delivered a backflip with a kick and knocked him back. Undertone slid underneath the Insecticon and undeployed onto Geass before the cool Autobot launched his mini-con's disc-like ult mode as a projectile, and even further propelled him with a sonic blast to break through the Insecticon's belly and puncture its spark chamber. Undertone pulled himself out as the dead Insecticon fell back. Teamwork makes the dream work, right buddy? Geass offered his hand for a high five, which the silent Undertone accepted as he leapt up to slap his metal hand against the larger one of his talkative partner. Guilford's Akatsuki lunged his sword forward, which Saberhorn blocked by crossing his dual blades, but when he tried to spread his arms out, they ended up impacting the wall, allowing Guilford to get in close as he rolled forward, pushing Saberhorn back while resorting to lunges and thrusts with his own blade. Saberhorn was able to block for the most part, but due to the narrow space of the ravine, he was unable to attack with both his blades at once. This was made evident with one thrust that impaled Saberhorn's right arm, before Guilford slashed straight up to completely sever it. One blade against one blade. Very sporting, don't you think? Guilford commented with a smirk. I see, Saberhorn grunted. Taking advantage of the narrow environment and limiting my movements, very clever. He readied his only remaining sword and arm, and took up a similar position and tactic to thrust his blade forward in the same manner Guilford had just done, putting the Black Knight on the defensive. But something I can still adapt to. Being pushed back, Guilford decided it was time to end this duel. He pushed his Nightmare forward, lunging his sword again just as Saberhorn did the same. The tips of both blades met, and the resulting force knocked both blades from their hands. Taking advantage of his opponent's disarmament, Saberhorn lunged his horn downward to slice at the Nightmare. But at the same time, Guilford had also fired his left-mounted Harken. Guilford's Nightmare was cut deep and dangerously close to the cockpit, forcing him to eject though Saberhorn was gouged on his left side by Guilford's attack, forcing him to cover his bleeding wound with his only hand as the ejected cockpit landed. Guilford pulled himself out to see the heavily injured Insecticon glaring down at him. He also happened to see Geass standing over his comrade with Undertone by his side, both looking ready to continue the fight. I know when I am beaten. Saberhorn relented as he looked directly at Guilford, but for this one-on-one match, your Nightmare is destroyed, and I am too injured to continue. I suppose for this duel, we shall call it a draw. Until next time, Black Knight Gilbert G. Guilford. Saberhorn then transformed and weakly flew straight out of the ravine. That was a pretty hardcore con, and you forced him to turn tail. Not bad, man. Geass complimented his human ally. But he also totaled my Nightmare, so he was correct in that it was a draw, at least for the one-on-one match. Guilford said with acceptance. Guess we'll just have to settle the score another time. But still, nice job man. Geass flashed a peace sign, to which Guilford smiled in response. Now let's go and get your lady. That is if she hasn't already escaped on her own, knowing Cornelia. Guilford replied with a chuckle. Though he was still greatly worried for her, his faith in her would remain unshaken. Something inside him told her that she was doing just fine, even without him to watch her back. Sir, we just lost Glowstrike's signal. One of the operators on board the Avalon reported. Out of all our forces down there, only 2 are still active. And they appear to have retreated. Another one sounded. Rather than feel frustrated or angry at the results, Schneisel seemed rather amused, even impressed. They took advantage of the terrain, separating and isolating our forces. Clever. It seems Commander Magnus is quite the opponent himself. Suddenly, the entire Avalon shook and appeared to begin descending, something that startled Schneisel somewhat. What's happening? Kanan questioned. One of the engines just went offline. Inside the Avalon's engine rooms, which appeared to be ablaze with blue fire, Chigusa had shot out an energon-fueled tank that seemed to flow the fuel directly into the machines hooked up to the float system outside. It didn't take long for the bullets to pierce through the glass and light up the tank, causing it to explode and destroy more of the room. Fortunately, Chigusa was at a safe distance and unharmed by the resulting explosion. Though she was shaken slightly by the shockwave and as the Avalon began to fall, it fell at an angle, almost causing her to lose her footing. Seeing that as her cue to leave, she went back to the door and left the engine room as quickly as possible. Energon shortage in our starboard engine. We're losing altitude. The engines are losing power faster than they can be recharged. Do you think it to be Cornelia? Kanan asked Schneisel. No, it most likely Miss New. Which means Cornelia is probably. He was interrupted as the door slid open and Cornelia rushed in with her gun, shooting up the armed guards that flanked Schneisel before aiming at the operators. If you don't want to go down with the ship, then leave now, she ordered. Do as she says, Schneisel told the operator. But sir, the ship is lost, and the enemy has secured the relic. There is no point in fighting any longer, Schneisel assured. Kanan, please help them to the escape pods. Yes, sir. Kanan nodded as he led the operators out of the control room with Cornelia keeping her gun trained on Schneisel. Not you, she told him as they were the only two left. You actually allowed my crew to leave unharmed, Schneisel told her. If we were dealing with the you from a year or two ago, you likely would have executed them on the spot. Perhaps you have changed, Cornelia. She narrowed her eyes at him. But I still see the fire inside you. The ferocity, the desire to achieve victory. So, it would seem the goddess of victory hasn't vanished, but has merely been tamed, so to speak. Is there a point you're trying to make? Cornelia questioned. Not really, just making an observation. But while you may not take this as a compliment, I do admire your change, Cornelia. Schneisel told her sincerely. I truly am glad you stepped out of our father's shadow and have become someone more independent, someone that our dear younger brother and sisters can depend on and care for. I am happy for you, honestly. Cornelia gave no response, making sure not to take her eyes off him as he slowly walked from his spot near the command chair and coming to a stop in the very center of the bridge. So, where does that leave us now? Schneisel asked. The Avalon is going down. Do you intend to trap me in here, so the captain goes down with his ship? Or are you just going to execute me right here? Neither. I'm taking you prisoner and back to our base. Cornelia answered. How can you be certain I'm not being tracked or monitored? Schneisel asked. I could lead the Decepticons back to your base. Which is why we're regrouping with my team first and they will check you over. Cornelia told him. Once we're certain you can't be tracked, you will divulge whatever information you have, including your intent to sabotage Megatron. By having Lelouch use his Geass on me, correct? Schneisel asked, causing Cornelia to narrow her eyes even further. Oh, don't be so surprised. I certainly was when I first heard of this power, as well as how one can become immortal from it, such as our dear uncle. Do you intend to become immortal as well? She questioned. Perhaps, though under current circumstances, I am unable to get to either CC or VV for obvious reasons. Schneisel said. But don't you worry, Cornelia, I am certain we'll see each other again. And please do give my regards to Lelouch. He let a small button slide from his sleeve and pressed it, causing the floor underneath him to open like a trapdoor before he fell in. No, she tried to shoot at him, but he was already gone, and the trapdoor had already closed. She tried to kick it open and even shoot it open, but it was already welded shut. She happened to glance out the main window as the ground came closer to see a small pod fly out into the distance, no doubt carrying her cowardly brother away from the falling ship. Schneisel, she called out in a fury. Cornelia, do you read me? Chigusa made contact. All the escape pods have been launched, but there is a safe room we can shelter ourselves in for when the ship crashes. Of course, he would be prepared for even that possible outcome. Cornelia thought with a scowl before making her way from the bridge. I'm on my way. Schneisel's escape pod had landed rather roughly on the flat ground some distance away from the ravine where the relic was located. The top of the pod opened, allowing Schneisel to stand as he turned around to see the Avalon come crashing down to the ground. Though the damage was likely minimal, his vessel was now likely going to be seized by the Autobots and Black Knights. But no matter, let them keep the relic in the Avalon. Let them have this minor victory, it won't change anything. Schneisel. He turned to see Kanan and the operators making their way toward him from the other escape pods that landed nearby. We all made it safely. Good, I'm glad to hear it. He smiled as he stepped out of the pod. It's nice to know something good came from this mission. Suddenly, Scorponic emerged from the ground behind him just as Saberhorn's insect mode flew in and they both transformed before them. The Autobots and their pets have the relic. Scorponic reported. And given it is a relic of the Primes, Lord Megatron will not be happy. Saberhorn added. I'll assume full responsibility for this failure. Schneisel said. This was my mission to lead after all. Your funeral. Skorponik commented. The former Britannian prince contacted the home base. We require a ground bridge to our current coordinates. Instantly, a portal opened, allowing the 2 remaining Decepticons and their human collaborators to enter the vortex. Schneisel was the last to enter, paying one final glance towards the crashed Avalon to see from the distance. The Autobots and Black Knights make their way closer, likely to rescue Cornelia and Chigusa. Schneisel gave a brief smile in amusement before entering the ground bridge, which closed shortly after. Ultra Magnus vehicle mode, along with that of Geass and Prowl, came to a stop before the downed Avalon, with Monica's Florence Nero landing close by, allowing her to deactivate and dismount her Nightmare. Guilford immediately stepped out of Geass as he transformed, along with Ultra Magnus and Prowl. Guilford did look incredibly worried, but happened to see 2 figures walking away from the downed ship and through the smoke, revealing themselves to be Cornelia and Chigusa, both leaning on each other for support. They were somewhat shaken by the crash and minorly injured, but very much alive, much to their relief. See Cornelia. Guilford ran up to them at first, but stopped himself and stood straight, trying to act and speak in a professional manner. I'm glad you're all right. I apologize for allowing you to be captured before, He was taken by surprise as Cornelia wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a hug. He had no idea at all how to respond to it. It's all right, just don't say anything. I get it, she assured, a relieved smile forming across her face. Though hesitant at first, Guilford smiled as he embraced her back. While he didn't regret being her knight in the past and serving her the way he didn't mind this sort of relationship he was forming with her either. Smiles were shared by everyone, even the normally stoic Ultra Magnus gave a small grin and a nod of approval. Hey, we didn't forget about you either. Geass said, leaning to Chigusa's level. Nice to see you in one piece, Chigusa. Thank you, she replied with a joking grin. Glad to see I'm not chopped liver. Cornelia broke off her hug from Guilford and addressed the leader of Gamma Team. Commander Magnus, was the relic secured? Indeed. Ultra Magnus presented the Skyboom shield. This is a relic of the Primes. Seriously. Cornelia looked surprised at first before appearing to be pleased. Lelouch will be thrilled about that. Listen, while we were being held captive, we learned that Schneisel is planning to betray and usurp Megatron. Chigusa revealed, getting all their attention. Somehow, that doesn't surprise me. Monica commented, shaking her head in disappointment. Guy's got a backbone of steel, I'll give him that much. Geass said, you know how many times Buckethead's been backstabbed, mostly by Starscream, and still came out on top. Yes, even if Schneisel is a strategist on Zero's or even Optimus level, the likelihood of him actually successfully betraying Megatron is rather low. Prowl added. Did he say how he was going to do it? Monica asked. No, just that Megatron was too focused on what we've been doing to see anything else. Cornelia replied. I do see where he might think that, but I agree that any attempt at usurping Megatron will most likely end in failure. Ultra Magnus said. That still doesn't mean he won't try. Cornelia said. In knowing my brother, he'll find a way to get all of us and Megatron in one fell swoop. So, this is a danger to us as well. Guilford noted. We'll inform Optimus and Zero once we return to base. Ultra Magnus said. We'll also arrange for a team to transport what remains of the Avalon for our use later. Add another flying ship to the arsenal. Geass smiled. Hell, we might just have our own personal armada after this. Ultra Magnus then accessed his comms. This is Gamma Team, we've secured the relic. Requesting ground bridge to our current coordinates. A ground bridge portal opened as Gamma Team proceeded to return to Horai Island. Among the last to enter was Cornelia, something Guilford noted with concern. Cornelia. It's just, I am glad we got the relic, but Cornelia couldn't find the right words. This whole thing with Schneisel, first he lost to Optimus in the Chinese Federation, now this. That's twice in a row, and both were major blows dealt to his side. I might be able to understand the first if Optimus was able to surprise him with Grimlock, something that the Decepticons didn't expect. But here, it just doesn't quite feel like we truly won this. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I follow. Guilford didn't quite understand. I guess what I'm wondering is, did we really win this battle? Or did he just let us win? Cornelia wondered. Guilford's eyes widened as he saw where she was going with this. If that is the case, then maybe Megatron would divert more of his attention toward us and make it easier for him to prepare whatever he's planning. That is a rather unsettling thought. Even if Megatron is able to come out on top, we still have no idea what Schneisel is planning. Cornelia said as she looked more than a little nervous. And I have a sinking feeling that a lot of people will probably die from it. People that we care about. It was rare to see Cornelia nervous like this, and she had every right to be. He knew how cunning Schneisel was, and if his initial betrayal of Britannia said anything, it was that the former prince didn't care for how many people would have to die to get what he wants. It reminded him too much of not only Megatron but the late Emperor. He quickly but gently reached out to grab Cornelia's hand. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We'll find a way to stop him, because we're not alone. Upon seeing him smile and hearing his words of encouragement, Cornelia couldn't help but feel a bit relieved. I know we're not. Let's go. With that, the two entered the ground bridge portal, their hands still intertwined with one another. And this at the end of Season 2 Part 11 of this What If. Hope you guys like it. Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.